Welcome back, guys. I know it's been about 8 months since we've done the show. I'm really excited to get back to doing this. You guys who've been on Spotify and Apple, I've disappeared for you, and I apologize. For those of you who've been on YouTube, you've seen we put out a lot of different type of content. But this was my favorite thing to do, which is the podcast, because for 1 week, I get to like fully submerge myself in the ideas of somebody else and try to learn from other people. I didn't know when I wanted to bring the podcast back, and then a buddy of mine, he calls me, he says, hey man, I'm gonna be in Las Vegas. And I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to bring the show back. So please welcome to the show. You've seen him several times on Soft White Underbelly. He's been on there several different times, including with Psy.D. He did one with my good buddy, James Sexton. Also, he is the author of The Value of Others. It's a fantastic book. It's required reading for my clients. And he is the owner of the PsycHacks YouTube channel with over 850,000 subs. Please welcome Orion Taraban to the show. How you doing, man?
Great to be back, man. Thanks for having me.
I love it, man. So I've said this before. I think I think Aaron Clary is also really good at this. I think you are probably better at describing the economics of dating better than anyone else I've ever heard, one. And two, when I was listening to Soft White Underbelly, one of the things he talked about was the way some of these intersexual dynamic ideas are displayed by some people is controversial. He said, he's like, I have a hard time listening to it, and that you present it in a way that doesn't offend anybody, or you're not deliberately trying to offend anybody.
Certainly not deliberately trying, but I can't always succeed in that respect.
Yeah, like the way you present it is a way where, like for instance, when I want to have these discussions, and I know Andrew Tate and I know Myron Gaines, when I want to have these discussions, a lot of times because they're so bombastic, I can't have these serious discussions with serious people because of the way they present it. But with you, I can. What I feel like is a lot of times with you blow the lid off a lot of like mainstream topics that people were afraid to have. Like for instance, men suffering. This is something that, in academia they were afraid to discuss. And that's why Richard Reeves has a book that's pretty popular right now because of the concept that in academia that wasn't possible to do. A lot of more liberal progressive universities, like for instance Harvard, they don't have an evolutionary psychology department. Even though Dr. Buss was on the staff there, they don't have one. And it's probably because they're not willing to look at some of the problems that are uncovered by that. One of the things you said after your first interview is that you were surprised by some of the vitriol that some of the people had. It was your first interview with Soft White Underbelly. Mm-hmm. Some of the vitriol some of the people had, calling you names, using pejoratives. And one of the things you said that is absolutely true that I have a really hard time getting some people to understand is that all relationships are transactional. Love can sprout for them, but love has nothing to do with relationships. Can you go into that idea?
Well, sure. That's kind of the fundamental premise of the book,
Yeah.
is that people enter into relationships to exchange unequal goods of comparable value.
Yeah.
You have to be unequal because we can't both trade the same thing. That's not really the basis of any kind of relationship. It's complementarity. You have to have what I want, I have to have what you want, and the perceived value of those things need to be more or less in the same ballpark, or else we're not going to do business with each other, as it were. And this is true even in friendships.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity cost for being here as opposed to any other place in the universe. And I'm doing this and foregoing other possibilities. So of all of the options that were available to me, I thought that this was the most valuable place that I could be at this given time,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that I am just mercenary with my calculations and I'm just selling my time to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
But it's also incorrect to say that those considerations don't enter into even a good or a virtuous person's consciousness. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person to think where you can spend your time optimally to the benefit of you and others.
And as you level up, you're going to have less time to spend. You have to be more choosy with who you spend time with. But the other part made me think about this, all relationships being transactional. And then I thought about, okay, what about the parent-child relationship?
Yeah.
And even with that, there's a dopamine release, there's oxytocin, and then there's your genetics getting passed on. And then the other side of the relationship is the child is being cared for so that they can grow up and go through puberty.
Well, I do have a little footnote in the book where I do talk about how the transactional model is best for voluntary relationships.
Sure.
And on some level, the parent-child relationship is not voluntary.
Yeah.
The child is not asked to be born, certainly not asked to be born to those parents.
Yeah.
So that might be one of the exceptions to the transactional model. However, when children age and they become adults, it absolutely applies.
Yeah.
And at some point, as children grow up, they decide to kind of have, whether and what kind of relationship they're going to have with their parents.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not based on one side sacrificing everything and giving everything to the child who's just receiving it.
Yeah.
Though that seems to be happening farther into late childhood or early adulthood these days, right?
I think what people had a problem with is the idea that they are in a loving relationship with their husband or wife, and that relationship started as transactional when it's offensive to them. Like the concept of all relationships being transactional, they might find is offensive.
Well, put it this way. It's like everybody is trying to secure relationships with their perceived best option.
Yeah.
So they ended up with their partner because that was the best person who would have them on some level. We can't necessarily argue that that person had a better option that they actually could have secured and forwent that for this worser option. So that person did some sort of value calculation, maybe not with numbers, but on the level of quantity. It's like, this person might be better for me than that person.
Yeah.
And once that kind of gets established in a person's mind, that's where they go and that's where they stay.
Yeah. You're saying the quiet part loud, meaning like women don't want to believe I made a value calculation to choose Brock over Chad. They want to believe it was vibe or energy or fate
but when their girlfriends say that they think that you can do better, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're making a value calculation just on the level of quantity, not on the level of numeric value.
In order for there to be a value calculation, there's value exchange. It has to be transactional. And again, I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. There's another thing you talked about that I think is fascinating, which was the idea. You used the example of Survivor, where there were a bunch of the men versus the women, and the women were getting mollywopped by the men. And then what happened was the women picked the most submissive men, or the most beta, for lack of a term, men, and combined forces with them. And then eventually the women won the whole thing. And then, so the question, and they asked you this on Soft White Underbelly, and I just think this is fascinating, is why are so many men in positions of power now? Why do they act so beta?
Well, I think that there is this systematic, I don't know if anybody is really pulling the strings behind the scenes, but the systematic push to kind of get rid of alpha males.
Yeah.
Alpha males are useful in certain contexts that are closer to survival or warfare. And they're dangerous. Whether or not they're actually threats, they're perceived as threats to those who are not as strong and not as capable. And what is their place in peaceful, civil, commercial society?
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to figure that out. It's like a warrior in a shopping mall. It doesn't really fit in.
Yeah, it's the guy from Vietnam who comes back and doesn't know what his life is.
Oh, yeah, that was my grandfather's life.
Yeah.
He was pretty messed up from the war, and I don't think he could ever really acclimate to civil society afterwards. Yeah. So, like, what the values and the virtues and the competencies and the skills that allow you to thrive and succeed in front-facing commercial society are not the same things that are going to keep you safe and healthy and prosperous when you're closer to survival.
Yeah.
And that's an issue both for men and women. And we don't really incentivize the development of those characteristics in men these days. In fact, if we're pushing strength and self-sufficiency and boldness and courage, you better be doing it for women. Like, girls get that kind of message, but it's sort of, what do men or young boys here? Become more sensitive, give up those traditional toxic gendered traits.
Yeah.
Don't be bound by them. It's almost like there's this gender reversal that we're teaching boys and girls. This is nothing new. I didn't originate this.
Sure. What do you think about the concept that, so what you said before is, as we get further and further away from a survival scenario, then you have these alpha traits being less and less necessary. But I think probably maybe as a result of needing those alpha traits, those were also the leaders of the society. And now you can have a more egalitarian society. And in order to do that, you have to push some of the alpha males out. And so that's why you see the cooperation between some of these beta males and the and women. And I see the other thing is, if you make content like that online, you grow incredibly fast. Like,
what kind of content?
Well, like women pandering, like Chris GQ Perry.
I don't know who that is.
Justin Baldoni.
Yes, I made an episode saying that making women feel right is a business. Just like making men feel angry is a business, but making women feel right is an even bigger business, because they spend, 3/4 of the the commercial spend
Yeah.
in a given year. So they're bigger customers than we are. So catering to women is something that marketers in Madison Avenue figured out in the 1950s, and we haven't really stopped doing so.
Yeah. Another question is, why are so many successful women unhappy? So, the concept, I waited longer to have children, got the master's degree, made a lot more money, but yet they seem to be reporting, a lot of them seem to be unhappy, maybe unfulfilled.
There's probably lots of reasons for that.
Yeah.
I think potentially on the deepest level is that they haven't been enacting their own life choices. They have been doing what their teachers and their parents and their society have incentivized them, encouraged them, and rewarded them to do. In much the same way that maybe traditionally a man would very quickly get a college degree, get married, have some kids, and then at 40 have a midlife crisis and say, holy shit, I've done everything I was supposed to do, but none of these ideas actually came from me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the source of some middle-age ennui, which is this liminally conscious recognition that the life I'm living was not really chosen by me, and I'm fulfilling potentially someone else's dreams. It's not very authentic. That's a deep level. It could also be that, it's like women have been fighting very hard for generations to have careers and to compete in that arena with men. And their victory is that, congratulations, you now get to work until you're 65, 68 years old, which men have only done out of necessity. Like men are often, most people are working to make enough money so they don't have to work anymore.
Sure.
The idea that I'm going to work and have that be a badge of honor or as something that is the meaning and purpose of my life is kind of absurd. Like that's a very recent belief, if it even exists today, right? But women have fought very hard for that right. And now they have it. And it's not everything that it's cracked up to be. Like I find my work to be very fulfilling, but I also don't have to work in order to make my living at some point anymore. So I work more or less because I choose to, and it's very fulfilling to do so.
Yeah.
But to fight for the right to have to work perpetually is very strange to me, to be honest.
Have you seen the Forbes survey where they survey working women who have children at home?
No.
83% of them said that if they had enough money or if their husband made enough money, they would prefer to stay home and take care of the children.
Sure. There's an old joke about, you ask the girl what she wants to grow up, she wants to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
You ask the girl in college what she wants to be, it's a lawyer. You ask the girl in law school what she wants to be, it's a lawyer.
Yeah.
You ask the lawyer what she wants to be, it's a housewife.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's just a symptom of people wanting what they don't have, and the grass is always greener. But it's sort of like, be careful what you wish for.
I also think it puts a thumb in the eye of the idea that the only reason women stay at home or wanted to take care of children was because of a patriarchal order that made them, or a cultural design that made them want to stay home, and not that women may actually want to take care of their children. Like, I think that I've seen that happen a lot before. You mentioned something before about, we're having this discussion on one of my other shows about the concept of gender norms. So like a gender norm would be men go out and work, women would stay at home with the kids or whatever. A gender norm would be men are more, more stoic and women are more expressive, those kind of things. And, one of the things I started to look at it from like an evolutionary psychology standpoint, and I was like, why is it men who are perpetuating these gender norms? And then I start like looking at why is it that men are more aggressive, more assertive, more dominant, more, more ambitious. And then I was just like, well, they're doing it in service of women, or at least historically throughout time they have. And then I look at it more and I'm like, these gender roles are not enforced through some patriarchal, convention. They're enforced because of women. Like the reason why women complain about, I want men who are more sensitive is because they kept sleeping with men who weren't. And those men kept having children, right? Women keep complaining about men who like don't express themselves. It's because those were the men you had sex with for the last 200,000 years. And then, I don't know what you think about this, but I get the vibe that it's really women who enforce these gender norms more so than men.
I think it does work both ways because men do choose women. I mean, they're stereotypically less choosy than the women are when it comes to their sexual partnering. And there could be a sexual strategy about that. But yes, it's like the gendered characteristics, to the extent that they're biologically embedded, are due to sexual selection over hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we got here because this was a collective, our best collective solution to problems of life. It's not that men intrinsically had to be this way or women intrinsically had to be this way. It's like it's almost like, this is going to sound bad, but like selective breeding when it comes to farm animals.
Yeah.
It's like, or agriculture, as we look at the kind of potential of an organism and say, okay, this one might actually be able to produce a lot of meat. This one might be able to produce bigger blossoms. And it's like, we're going to selectively breed when we see the potential inside of this organism in the direction to exploit those latent tendencies.
Yeah.
And none of this is done through some sort of conscious conspiracy.
Of course not,
It's done through some sort of like mysterious impulse to seek out and to respond in an attracted sexual way to that which might represent a solution to the problem of life.
Yeah.
It's very elegant if you think about it that way.
Well, the other thing is, I heard you talking about this, On the Origin of Species. I'd heard of the book, and then I read Charles Darwin.
That book is so good. Charles Darwin is such a lucid writer. It's very accessible even for today's audience.
Even for today. And then in the end of the book, so one of the great things is if you read Principia Mathematica by Newton, he talks about, ideas of things that were ideas that would be in an empty space. Like, for instance, objects just traveling in motion for an infinite time. But he didn't have the advent of a telescope or a space program. He didn't know that there was a vacuum up there. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
But yet he predicted correctly, and even NASA today still uses his formulas for, like, gravitation and things like that. And then when you look at Charles Darwin, at the end of the book, when he starts to postulate about all species coming from a single cell organism, the idea that he was able to come up with that idea and be correct not maybe hundreds of years, but 100 years before we were able to prove it, is really, at the end of the book, when you realize, it sounds obvious, but when you realize he's doing this in the 1860s, he's coming up with these ideas, it really is fascinating.
Darwin's kind of a badass. One other little anecdote is that he once in one of his travels found this deep-pitched orchid, and it was very confusing to the naturalists at the time because there was no known animal or bird that had the beak structure such that it could reach the pollen and nectar that deep inside of this orchid. And so Darwin thought about it, and he said, well, that must mean that there is a moth with a retractable proboscis that exists that pollinates this orchid, or else this orchid wouldn't have created this adaptation and we wouldn't see it today. And people just laughed at him because no one had ever seen a moth with this retractable proboscis. And, it took another 30 or 40 years, but they finally discovered that moth. It's like, it has to be that way. Things don't evolve in a vacuum. And if you really think clearly, what's Sherlock Holmes's thing? Like, if you take away the improbable, no matter how absurd it might sound, what's left is the truth.
The truth, deduction. That's what deduction means. It's coming to a realization by subtraction. All other things not being possible. The reason why I thought it was interesting, so obviously I read a lot on evolutionary psychology, and when I had Dr. David Buss on, he said the first evolutionary psychologist was Charles Darwin, and I thought that was interesting. And I go back and I read Charles Darwin and actually read some Freud, and they seem to tie so much of what happens in natural selection to sexual selection. I mean, the sexual desires or things that that help us survive in natural selection, sexual selection. And one of the ideas that Darwin had was the concept of female selection creating proclivities in men, meaning the desires of women almost like shaped how men would perform. And this idea was so foreign or offensive to people back in the 1860s, or actually, I mean, the book isn't popular for probably another 20 years. It was so foreign that a lot of people moved away from it. And the explanation I've heard from some evolutionary psychologists is then behaviorism comes in and sort of takes over. And for 70 years, we move away from these concepts that evolution shapes our psychology until maybe the 1970s with sociobiology and then evolutionary psychology. I'm just wondering, have you ever heard this concept before? It's basically like Darwin's ideas were so offensive. Obviously, the ideas were offensive to Christians also, but the idea that the activities and proclivities of men were shaped by women being something that was really hard for people to understand.
It still is, and some of Darwin's theories are not accepted today. And I think part of the reason why it was hard for, besides the Christianity element, for people to accept kind of what Darwin was saying is true, is because there were two other disciplines that were still in their infancy around the time that Darwin wrote that you kind of need to complete the puzzle. And one is psychology, modern psychology, and sociology. So when you talk in a way that says men's traits are shaped through female desire,
Yes.
the individual woman hears that and says, that's absurd, I don't feel that way. And she could be correct. So this is where we need sociology, and this is where we need psychology.
Because the individual woman is wrong, but on a societal level.
That's the sociology part,
yeah.
is that it was only about in the end of the 19th century that we started as a disciplined science to collect population level statistics and to see emergent phenomena that weren't invisible on the individual level. The second part of this is sort of the discovery of the unconscious, which started to come into being around the mid-19th century where Darwin was writing, usually actually through hypnosis.
Yeah.
That was the first real modern indication that the unconscious mind existed, but it was obviously popularized by Freud in the early 20th century.
Yes.
And so that's the idea that you aren't aware of most of your reasons for doing the things that you're doing. You might not even be aware of most of your thoughts or feelings. Like your conscious self might be the tip of a gigantic iceberg.
Yeah.
And that is a freaky, uncanny concept to actually approach, let alone accept. We'd like to think that we are actually the ones running the show.
Yeah.
But I don't have any conscious intention to keep my heart beating.
Yeah.
You know, I don't secrete the bile in my glands throughout my body. Like a lot of what I do isn't in my control. And thank God for that, because sometimes I lose my keys, you know? So it's a good thing that
for my heart to beat today.
Yeah, totally. It's like, thank you, heart. You know, it never skips a beat, even when I'm drunk, even when I'm asleep. It's pretty incredible, actually. So there's a large part of us that is outside of our conscious awareness, and it's probably for the best.
Yeah.
And so that's how the individual person can say, this doesn't apply to me, and be both correct and incorrect at the same time.
On an approximate level, they're correct. On an ultimate level, they're not. But what I also thought was interesting, what you just said made me think of something. The idea of other mammals, like we're the descendants of primates who are the descendants of rodents. If you go back, a rodent also, his heart continues to beat. The fear of fire that almost every mammal has, or the fear of snakes and reptiles that most mammals have, like the fear of snakes that a chimpanzee has is derived from the same ancestor that we have. Like it all came from the same place. That is incredibly offensive to a lot of people. And so when you go back to the subconscious, like a lot of these subconscious things, if they're derived from, it's not just that there was a subconscious, that was one discovery, but that this subconscious in a large part was derived from things that helped us survive. Evolutionary psychology, things that helped us solve evolutionary problems. And I think a lot of people have a very hard time. And what's interesting is conservatives have a hard time with evolution because it goes against what's in the Bible. Liberals have a hard time with evolution because it defines gender norms, or it defines that there are two genders, or that genders had certain roles historically. And so it kind of puts it in this strange place in the middle where you can somehow offend both sides.
Yeah, I think the liberal side is to split hairs between sex and gender.
Yeah.
Is that there's biological sex, and then there is gender, which they consider to be a social construct.
Yeah.
And there might be some truth to that.
Well, there's truth in it if they believe there's truth in it, but it's not based specifically in a scientific finding.
No, it's more theoretical
Correct,
than anything else, But you can create survey data to substantiate and reify certain concepts. Like, that's easy to do.
Yeah.
It's also interesting, like when I taught my class on emotion, I had some text from Darwin to initiate the course, because where do feelings come from? It's like not all organisms demonstrate the capacity to feel.
Yeah.
Like it really seems to be mammals, creatures with limbic systems that seem to be able to process and communicate emotion. And Darwin wrote a whole book about where emotions come from. And we think that they're just like intrinsic to us, but they really served survival. They were solutions to problems of living, just like anything else that has evolved through evolution.
And if one of those, like for instance, a very controversial one is the concept of male jealousy. So if you look at male jealousy as an evolutionary adaptation, well, then that sort of A lot of people want to look at male jealousy as just insecurity in men.
Sure, yeah.
That's where it comes from. There's no possible reason. There's a necessity for it. Why don't you let that dude flirt with your girl? Why are you so insecure, bro? Who hurt you, bro? And then you look, it's like historically, male jealousy was what kept men from getting cuckolded historically, and that's where it came from. So it's an evolutionary adaptation. Well, that sort of maybe not justifies it, but it gives it a reason for existence.
Sure.
And you can't infantilize the idea by saying, no, it's just insecurity.
No, it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah. I think insecurity can trigger it, but I think it is an evolutionary adaptation.
Probably. And I think it's instructive that there has never been in wide circulation a female equivalent to cuckold. Like,
Right.
It's not an insult. It doesn't disparage a woman's womanhood
Yeah.
if her man were to sleep with another woman.
Yeah.
But it really cuts to the quick a man's status and sense of self if his woman sleeps with another man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I'd never discussed this idea with you, but the idea of how, so for instance, Hillary Clinton and Beyonce, they get cheated on,
Yeah.
and they stay with their man, and they're lauded for it. They don't lose any fans, they don't lose any popularity for doing so. But then you see situations like with Will Smith and other situations like that where men are getting cheated on, and it's not just that they get cheated on; they actually lose some level of status and are derided.
Yeah, it's a status thing.
It seems like there is, and women hate when I have this conversation. Often they get really upset, but it's like getting cheated on, it sucks. If you're getting cheated on, it's terrible. If you're getting cheated on, also cheating itself is immoral because you're lying to the other person. But it seems to have a much more deleterious effect on a man's status than it does on a woman's. There's a double standard there.
Sure, there's plenty of double standards. I think inequality is the norm, not the exception when
Yeah.
it comes to men and women in various respects, though we're loath to admit that in today's day and age. Yeah, I think a lot of the pain and the emotional upsurgence that happens in the wake of female infidelity in men has something to do with the loss of status.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because for better or for worse, it's harder to determine a man's social standing at a glance.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to determine, in a sense, his social standing or even his attractiveness. Like a competent, kind neurosurgeon who makes 7 figures a year could be just some guy at a local bar, and he could drink all night by himself. For better or for worse, women's status and their attractiveness is more visible and overt.
They carry it with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we know that beautiful women tend to, well, it's affiliative dating, is that people of comparable attractiveness tend to end up with each other.
Assortative mating.
I'm sorry, assortative mating.
Yeah.
Okay. So we know that also because of the way that male and female status is calculated differentially, that beautiful woman, all things being equal, is going to be with a high status man, even if he's not as physically beautiful as she is,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of the trade-off. It's the sex object versus success object. So we also assume that a woman who is more physically attractive has access to more and more attractive suitors. So if a beautiful woman who we presume has lots of optionality is with that man in particular, we can assume that there must be more than meets the eye with respect to that guy,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Now, bring in the other guy. So if that man is seen with the woman, especially if it's his wife or his woman, that man has committed a great deal of resources in the service of that relationship. If a woman sleeps with another guy, one, it suggests that there was something that was higher status about that man
Yes.
that attracted her to him. So that's already kind of a blow to that first, the husband's social standing.
And the second guy didn't commit all the resources.
So the guy's going to feel bamboozled
Yeah.
because he paid way more for the same product.
Yeah.
So this goes back to a concept that I've talked about on the channel, which is that all men pay, but the more she likes you, the greater the discount. Is that the more attractive men are basically smashing women who, whereas lower status guys are needing to pay, they're needing to offer relationship security, they're needing to get down on one knee and provide the ring. That's how they can secure access to the same sexual opportunity because they're less attractive
Yeah.
than their intrasexual competition.
Yeah. I think a lot of guys who don't have a lot of experience with women may, in a vacuum, be more attractive, but then they offer up relationships way too early. I tell to guys all the time, it's like, I really feel like if I'm dating a girl after we've slept together, she needs to be the one to ask, what are we? Not me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think this comes from a little bit of misunderstanding.
Yeah.
We could call it maybe failure of perspective taking, is that a lot of men, myself included, growing up, think that women just want relationships. Men want sex. They don't want relationships. Women want relationships. They don't want sex. And that's not true, is that women want different things from different men.
There would be no Las Vegas if that was true.
So these guys are thinking, well, I know what women want. They want relationships and commitment. So I will give them what they want, because then they will give me what I want.
Yes.
Which is actually the basis of rational exchange.
Yeah.
But it's not that simple.
They're bidding against themselves, sometimes out of desperation.
They don't realize that,
Yeah.
though. It with limited understanding from it kind of looks rational or logical what these guys are doing. They just need better information into what women are actually valuing.
Yeah. Going back to what you said before, we're talking about infidelity. Dr. David Buss has a great book called The Murderer Next Door. And that's kind of what, before he was an evolutionary psychologist, like he looked at some of the statistics on historical murder. It's a really fascinating book. And of course, the majority of murders are men killing other men for land resources and for women, right? So if you go back through the anthropological record, you find skeletons of men that have been battered, skulls broken, bow and arrow, stuff like that. And the female skeletons are pristine. Rarely are they ever attacked, because that's one of the things. Genghis Khan would kill all the military-age males and then take all the women, right? So that kind of thing would happen. And so, when you think about like the ultimate disrespect was what you just said before, a man takes another man's woman, but he doesn't pay for anything. So Tupac says, saying to Biggie Smalls, I fucked your bitch and whatever, like that kind of stuff. Like that's the first thing he says in his diss track is, I took your girl, I stole your girl. Bulgarian saying it to the guy from bodybuilder.com, I fucked your bitch in some Gucci flip-flops. Future saying that to some other dude. Like that kind of thing is like the it's not just that it's disrespectful. It might be the ultimate sign of disrespect. Like if Elon Musk starts dating Donald Trump's wife, like that kind of thing. There's really nothing you could do worse than that.
Sure.
And also, when you look historically, it's the basis for maybe not the majority, possibly the majority of all homicides comes from that male disrespect or that male necessity for respect that leads to something like this.
Yeah, I think in some states, until even very recently, if a man
in Texas in 1984.
Oh, you already know what I'm gonna say.
If you walked in and watched your wife actually having sex with another man and you killed both of them, you would be convicted of a felony and not go to jail. That's the way it would work.
Said even better than I was going to say.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Yeah. And it was I believe it was 84 when they changed that law. I could be wrong. That could have been the drunk driving law, but I remember it's the 70s or 80s they changed that law.
But we still have, crime of passion. It would at least be an attenuated murder.
It wouldn't be first degree. It would be
Certainly
second
not.
or third degree. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, a lot of southern states would have that because what is it? They would look and say, well, jealousy's natural. The law is written to say, what would a reasonable person do? Well, a reasonable person catching their wife having sex with another man and then killing that man, it would be reasonable for them. Just like, again, if someone were to mug my mother, what level of violence would I be willing to perpetrate on that person in order to stop them from hurting my mother? And a reasonable person might go all the way to, some lethal force. And so that's the reason why the law was written that way.
Yeah, I remember also in my lectures on anger and rage and their evolutionary components, I included some research that showed that cultures of honor have higher rates of violence and aggression than cultures that don't. Because cultures of honor are generally, they're less propertied.
Yeah.
They're not really landed agrarian places. So maybe they were nomadic or herders, or it's like the Wild West. It's like you carry your wealth in your reputation.
Yes.
And so any disparagement of your reputation is in those cultures tantamount to say like stealing your property.
Yeah.
And we in propertied society say that, more or less if you have a home invasion, you're justified in doing what you need to do to defend yourself in that situation. But what if your property is not a home, you don't live in that kind of society, your property is your status and your reputation?
Yeah.
It seems to me like the license that we give the propertied person when he's transgressed upon should be given to the honorable man when he's transgressed upon. But that's, tricky stuff.
Yeah.
Tricky stuff.
The other side of that coin is the the politician who has a beautiful wife. They all notice that he has a beautiful wife. It's part of his status. Or several times I've gone to, let's say self-help conferences, and it's 90% men, and I'll show up with like 2 or 3 beautiful women, and all of a sudden every guy there wants to meet me. They want to understand, because it's confused. Like, what the fuck did this guy do to be with someone like that? And a lot of times these are just my friends. These are just girls that I'm friends with. I've noticed that a lot of times for me, from a networking standpoint, if I'm just with beautiful women, every guy in the room, I've met several celebrities this way, going to parties, having several girls with me, and then they just come up and start talking. So it is one of these interesting things, which you said before, is like, if the man is with a beautiful woman, other people subconsciously are asking, what did he do to be able to get that? And if he's not that good looking, they even ask more, what did he do? If the guy's
Sure.
if the guy's 6'3" Chad Australian covered in, tattoo sleeves and a 6-pack, yeah, then they're like, oh, okay, I understand that's why they're
Australians hot these days?
Huh? Here in Las Vegas, shout out to all the guys from Thunder Down Under. They all watch my show. There's like 3, it's Magic Mike, Chippendales, Thunder from Down Under. And a lot of the guys come up to me, they're like fans of the show or whatever. And whenever I see those guys and I go out with them, it's just effortless. Like, they do nothing. They do nothing. They talk with Australian accent, and the girl following them around, you'd think that they'd be like some kind of like promiscuous woman. No, it's like some accountant that's been with one guy her whole life.
That's her fantasy.
Yeah.
That's what they cater to.
Yeah, that goes to another thing, is the idea of the good guy gets the good girl. That's just not the case. Like,
No.
Machine Gun Kelly got Megan Fox, and everybody wanted Megan Fox. And Machine Gun Kelly is the biggest despot there is, right? So I think that's another misnomer I have to kick out of my clients, is this idea that if I check all the boxes to be the good guy, then the good girl will manifest for me in church or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which
Goes to my next point, which was attraction comes first. I love this idea. The idea that you put it so succinctly. The idea is like, women will say they want loyalty and kindness and all these other things, but yet they'll date a man who didn't have all those other things. And why did they sleep with him? That you have some female friends, and all 5 of them complain about this one guy named Brock, and they say all these things that are wrong with him. And they've all slept with Brock. And you're like, well, if you all slept with Brock, then that means something else was more important. Can you go into that?
Sure. It's one of my more popular episodes. It's called The Part That Women Always Leave Out. This was something that confused me in my 20s, when I would approach a number of women that I knew out of the good faith desire to learn what is the truth, the female desire, so that I could give them what they wanted, so I could enter into a fulfilling relationship with one. That was what I was thinking. And I heard things like, I want a nice guy, I want to feel safe, I want somebody who's reliable, somebody who's loyal, someone who's very kind. And I'm thinking, well, fuck, I'm all of those things. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble, especially compared to some of the men that I've seen women in my milieu date. So it speaks to what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And I realized that there's a part that these women always leave out, because it's socially unacceptable to say it out loud, but they want all those things kind of. But they want them from the men that they're already attracted to.
Already attracted to. Yes.
That means that those things cannot meaningfully contribute to attraction,
Yes.
because it takes time to determine whether a man is kind or loyal. So women, sort of like, men do something comparable, where they look at the hot woman and they're like, sure hope she's not crazy, and they're just rolling the dice. And so the woman goes to these attractive men and says, I hope that he doesn't cheat. I hope that he's a nice guy. And turns out so many of them aren't, right? But that doesn't stop people from wanting what they want, because saying that it's bad for them, filling their heads with what they should like instead, doesn't actually change what people are attracted to. This is very deep. It has a history that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. It's even unconscious in the individual. It's based on childhood experiences, imprinting of the parental relationships. So it's not all just the ghosts from our caveman past. People are imprinted with various sexual desires from within their own lifespan as well. But yeah, the things that you have to, as a man, if you're interested in competing in the sexual marketplace successfully, you have to put the components that contribute to attractiveness to women first.
Yeah. You said your prime directive as a man, I believe, is to be attractive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It comes before everything else, because the world is going to tell you something else. even your family's going to tell you, you just be a good
Your
guy.
grandma's going to say you're just the sweetest boy.
Yeah.
And you're so handsome, and all the girls are going to be chasing after you.
And your girl cheated on you because she's not good enough for you. That's what they'll tell you as well. They'll
Really?
say things like that.
I haven't heard that one.
You have never heard that before? It's like, no, baby, you can do better.
No, what I usually hear is that she cheated on you because you weren't treating her right. You know,
Yeah.
Yes, clearly
Sure.
she had unfulfilled needs, and that's why she strayed.
Yeah.
And you need to just man up and be a better boyfriend and be a better husband.
Sure.
So when men cheat their cads, when women cheat, it's because their husbands weren't giving them what they needed.
For sure. The other thing I thought was interesting is this concept of assortative mating. You brought it up before. And then there's this debate, assortative mating versus hypergamy. So what I'll hear some people who really don't like the content that maybe you and I put out, manosphere in general, male self-improvement, intersexual dynamic content, is the idea of hypergamy puts women in a bad light, which I don't think it does.
Why? Why does it say that?
If I had a daughter, I would want her to be with a better man. So I understand the concept of hypergamy. But whenever I talk to a lot of these people, Jasmine Jafar came on my show at one point, and she had this argument that I've heard several times, which is because assortative mating, meaning most people end up dating across, they end up dating across, that hypergamy isn't real or that hypergamy doesn't manifest, and they find the whole idea to be like offensive. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you square the circle? Because I know you believe in hypergamy,
Yeah.
and you understand the concept of assortative mating. How do both of these things exist?
Because I have to be in the ballpark.
Yes.
That's how you reconcile the things. It may not be equal. Like I said, inequality is the rule when it comes to men and women, not the exception.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to dial in exactly one's objective sexual marketplace value as it is. But we know that more or less people are in the same ballpark, and you're not going to be and if there is a big disparity, it never moves against the direction of hypergamy.
Yeah. She's not going a big disparity down.
Exactly. She's not dating a broke fat
Yeah.
dude.
So the way I see it is it's the reason why assortative mating occurs, and it kind of occurs, is because of economics more than the idea that hypergamy isn't real. Meaning the barista does not date the billionaire because there's not that many billionaires, but there's quite a few baristas. Like eventually when you look at it from an economic standpoint, there just aren't enough of those men to get to settle with you to go around. So you're going to eventually end up in assortative mating. But here's the main argument I have for hypergamy. It's the studies that show that men are unemployed or underemployed. No one wants to have sex with them. Like whenever we talk about hypergamy, we keep talking about all the women chasing after the top 10% of men, and we keep leaving out that bottom third of men. Scott Galloway says it, no one wants to mate with broke men. And so if no one wants to mate with broke men, then that's the other side of hypergamy that everyone seems to ignore, this loneliness epidemic, the men taking their own lives at a massive rate, especially after divorce. These kind of things, to me, that is more of a sign of hypergamy. The men that are left behind, 80% of men on dating apps deemed unattractive, men on average having to swipe 1,000 times for 6 matches, women on dating apps swipe 1,000 times for 100 matches, right? These
They
kind of
still
things.
swipe. I mean, if I were a woman, I would just go to my likes and cherry pick the
You're correct.
winners.
So that's interesting. We can get into that too, dating apps versus social media, because I totally agree with you on that one as well. But the other concept is...
Sorry to interrupt, but also it's like, how can we look at those statistics and not believe that the economic model of relationships is valid? Like,
Yes.
If relationships weren't transactional, why are these bottom 30% of men unfuckable?
Yes.
It's like, are you saying that there's no good, kind, honest men who would make loyal boyfriends in that bottom 30%?
Yeah.
I find that very difficult to believe.
I was at dinner last week with this, she's a model. She was on the cover of Maxim. We were just having dinner. She's here for a crypto conference. She's given a speech. And we were having a discussion, and I was explaining. I see her because she's very intelligent. She's very pretty, and we're at Toca Madera, and I was explaining to her this concept of men and women. Whenever they see there's a study on this. Whenever they see unattractive people, they dehumanize them in their brain. Like you'd see them as less of a human. But the phenomenon is more pronounced in females. And there's a reason for this. Women are more subject to disgust than men are. And I explained to her, I was like when women complain about men, I hear women all the time say, most men cheat. I was like, that's not true at all. Most men don't cheat. The men you notice cheat more likely. And so what we had this discussion, and I said, I was like, you don't notice most men. I'm just telling you, you don't. You're too beautiful. And then she goes, that's not me. That's other women. And then I go, tell me about our busser. And she goes, we have a busser? And I was like, the skinny black dude standing right over there, that was our busser. You don't even remember he exists because he wasn't part of your reticular activation system, doesn't see him because he wasn't attractive. And it's one of these craziest things where men think the women hate you. They don't hate you. They don't even see you.
Yeah, you had this great idea that you shared with me the last time I was here.
Yeah.
I don't think it was on camera, though. Maybe you've talked about it on your channel, where there's actually 3 sexes,
yes.
right?
There's high status men, women, and low status men. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like different creatures with respect to how they live and how they are related to in society.
Yeah, it is. Where basically most men are chasing after women, and then most women are chasing after high status men.
Yeah, and you hear that in most of the arguments that feminism makes. They're still looking at the top 0.0001%. Why are all the presidents historically
male?
Male?
Yeah.
Why are most of the CEOs male?
Yeah.
And they're ignoring the bottom, really 80%.
Bottom
men.
80% of men that are outside the standard deviation. Or they're also ignoring the fact that women in general just don't have the testosterone levels that men do and may not be as assertive, aggressive, and try to be as ambitious as the men who got those 450 out of the 500 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah, I talked about this in a recent episode called What Women Want. When you examine all kinds of traits in men and women on a population level, their normal distribution curves are very similar.
Yeah.
So on a population level, men and women are more similar than this conversation would likely reveal.
Yeah.
However, there are some consistent differences having to do with the kurtosis of those curves, which is like the peakedness.
Yes.
And women peak more at the mean, and men are a little bit flatter.
Negative kurtosis, yeah.
So that means that they have fatter tails in either direction, which means in most things, there are more average women.
Yeah.
And in most things, there are more terrible failures that are men and rampant successes that are men.
More men outside. So one of the studies that showed this, there one standard deviation for IQ is 15 points. So more men outside of 115 and below, above 115 and below 85 than there are women.
And I didn't come up with this idea, but the explanation for that is, for whatever reason, the Y chromosome seems to be where nature has decided to do its experiments.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
it takes risks with the men that they seem to not do with the women or the females more generally.
Evolutionarily, you probably needed some men to be highly intelligent and some men to just actually do the labor.
Maybe, but maybe that's just, you roll the dice and it was snake eyes. Maybe that wasn't intentional that they were so dumb.
The concept of negative and positive kurtosis, I used to work in stock options, so we talk about this a lot. So it's like there's one of my favorite books, again, Cindy Meston, David Buss wrote this book called Why Women Have Sex, and they go over 237 reasons why.
I bought the book. I still haven't read it yet.
Read it. It's really good. Now, some of the reasons are coercion. Some of the reasons are very ugly, but it just goes over all the reasons why women have sex with men. And one of the things it goes over is that for women's desires in men, there's actually negative kurtosis, meaning there's more reasons why women desire men. Whereas when men look at Jessica Biel when she's young and like Selma Hayek in Dusk Till Dawn, no one looks at Selma Hayek in Dusk Till Dawn as like, that woman's ugly. No, like what there's a million of us in a room, we're all like, yes, her, she's there's no disagreement. Whereas like some women cannot find white men attractive or black men attractive. There seems to be this massive differentiation. I know some women who would never have sex with a dude that has tattoo sleeves, and I know some women who only have sex with men who have tattoo sleeves. But for men, it seems like it's positive kurtosis in what we're attracted to, and for women, it seems like it's negative kurtosis, more of a fat tail in what they're attracted to.
Yeah, I think there's probably pros and cons to that. It's a double-edged sword. It means that there might be more ways to be attractive to women, but there's probably more ways to be disqualified by women as well.
There's more plays we can run. I have a friend of mine, she only dates men who dress up like vampires.
Okay.
Seriously.
Well, she knows what she's into.
Yes, that's what she's into. And I'm just like thinking, if I met a woman who's really beautiful and she did or did not dress up like a vampire, would I care? And the answer is not much.
Really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like the things we look for in the book, at the very beginning of the book, he goes, if we had wrote a book called Why Men Have Sex, it would have been a pamphlet, right? It's like 4 reasons why men have sex, but like 237 reasons why women have sex. So I thought that the kurtosis thing you said, for men, you're right, it's negative kurtosis when it comes to like IQ distribution or accomplishment, right? You have some men who are incredibly dumb, and then you have Albert Einstein.
And this is also why, to be honest, I sometimes find it difficult to sympathize with some of the young men, especially who are at the bottom, is that there's actually so many more pathways available to you to be attractive than there are for women, for better or for worse. Like if you just don't fit the normative standard of beauty, it's going to be a very difficult road for you, which is why in the last 10 years we've had these public campaigns to change beauty standards, is that women who are getting greater control over the media wanted to not be as disqualified by the narrow sexual standards that men impose on women. But for a guy, if you're not great looking, if you're not going to be Thunder from Down Under, you can be rich. Yeah. You can be funny. That actually works. Like funny guys get laid.
And funny is real. Yeah. And it's the hardest thing to teach, but it really does work.
Yeah. The man who seeks wit has none.
Yeah.
I think that was Oscar Wilde.
How many comedians I'm friends with, and in their childhood they were shy, and they just worked on it mainly so that they could get better with women. A lot of them, that was the motivation, and then they became.
That's man's motivation to do pretty much anything.
Exactly. Going back to what I said before, gender roles, gender norms are perpetuated by women because we wanted. And again, I'm not blaming women for this. I'm just saying we wanted women and the approval of women. I'm talking about men in general.
Sure.
Historically, the entire gender.
And approval is not necessarily, sorry to interrupt, you're a good man, Michael.
Yes.
Approval is, take me now, Michael.
Yeah.
Right? That's the real female approval.
That's also, I say women vote with their vaginas, yes. So I have a friend of mine, Owen Cook. He used to run Real Social Dynamics, and he does this video where he goes, talk to this guy real quick. If you want him to be attractive to women, can you tell him, should he be himself? She's like, yeah. Should he have good energy? He's like, yeah. Should he just be an authentic person? He's like, yeah. And then he's like, okay, go have sex with him now. And she's like, oh no. I was like, well, I thought that was the things that made him attractive. And then it's like, it's so funny because you and I are still having
be attractive and then be yourself.
Correct.
Michael, that's the part that women always leave out.
Correct.
Just be yourself.
And the more attractive you are, the more you can start off by being yourself. But so many men have so many bad habits that I'm like, you need to get rid of those bad habits before you try to be yourself.
Yeah. I mean, to what extent is the self organic, and to what extent is the self intentionally cultivated? You know what I'm saying?
It's fluid. You're different all the time. Yeah.
But I do think that, like, let's just take a very obvious example, like learning a foreign language. Like in the beginning, it's very conscious, it's very intentional, it's very problematic.
Yeah.
But if you stick with it long enough, it becomes a part of your identity. You might even be able to effortlessly converse or dream in that language.
Yeah.
So are you a foreign language speaker, like innately?
Yeah.
Or is it really a result of all of your efforts that it's now become this unconscious talent or capacity that you have?
You woke up late, you ate poorly, you lived in your mom's basement, and all of a sudden you start hanging around guys who are more successful than you, get up early, go to the gym all the time, and then you become more successful. At what point were you yourself? Were you yourself before, or are you yourself now? And the idea is what yourself is not organic. It is something that evolves and changes over time. So whenever I hear women say, hey, these men should just be themselves, it just makes me think they're trying to pick out who the losers are quicker. Because if a man watches copious amounts of pornography and he says, sits on his couch and he's morbidly overweight, him being himself only hurts him with women. Him deciding to not be himself, to change his diet in order to improve himself, in order to get through 60 books, read The Value of Others, read all these books, to get in the gym, to cold plunge, intermittent fasting, all this kind of stuff. Now he's not doing things that feel organic, but now he is more attractive to women.
Potentially, but there might be a pain period. Like learning to speak Spanish, I'm going to make a lot of grammatical mistakes. It's going to be a pain in the ass to speak with me.
Yeah.
It could be a form of charity to communicate with me on some level. So that person who starts to do the right things, it's not going to feel authentic from him. And it's actually not going to be attractive to the women either. Like that comes after competency and mastery, which takes years and years of effort.
Yeah. I think all success, like what you said before, you said you stuck with your YouTube channel for 2 years. She's like, no matter what it felt like, I was going to commit to this for 2 years.
I had to. I probably would have given up.
Yeah.
Because the outcomes were so poor.
So the outcomes being so poor, when you think about it initially, that is feeling inorganic. And what I try to tell, often I tell this to my clients, there's no example where you're going to be successful where it's going to feel organic. Because if it did, they'd all be successful. If I taught you techniques to get the girl of your dreams, if it felt organic, every guy would get the girl of your dreams. So it doesn't work like that. It's an economic thing. It's a function of supply and demand. You have to do you talked about when somebody values something and the winners, they have to pay a disproportionately high price to get that thing because other people want that thing.
Yeah, the cost of winning is overpaying.
Cost of winning, you have to pay more for someone else's free agent to come to your team than if you had drafted him yourself.
Of course.
So it's that type of mentality, and so many guys, because of their level of entitlement, don't grasp this concept. Women are looking and they're comparing you to other men. You're going to have to compete in order to get them to notice you, and compete in different markets, being in really good shape, being funnier. What I loved was your idea of generating attraction through men being able to garner attention. That is so incredibly true.
Sure.
I think that's the most true form of attraction that exists today.
Because I do think that attention is for women what sex is for men.
Yes.
It's like the most reinforcing
Heroin,
thing
man.
that you can give a woman.
Yeah. The guy I told you last time about parallel lives when you were on here.
Yeah, you told me about that. Is that still a thing?
Yeah. So Ethan Kaiser came to one of my events last week.
Who's Ethan Kaiser?
He's the guy who created Parallel Lives. It's a genius app. And the crazy thing is,
there hasn't been a cop and robbers thing.
So you asked that question. You're like, were people going to figure this out?
Yeah,
so I want you to consider this. I've brought up Parallel Lives on this channel more than say 10, 15 times. I have tons of clips on it. Ethan Kaiser comes to one of my events where most of the girls watch my content that are there, and he still gets away with it. One of his buddies pulls out Parallel Lives. It shows that there's 25,000 people watching, and then he says, "Hey guys, donate money." So the AI generates. It looks like people are donating money to you, and whatever you say, it's like, "What do you think about this girl Sally?" And they're like, "Sally's hot." It's AI generated comments. And the women lose their mind, literally start grinding on the guy in front of their boyfriends. It's one of the most maddening things I've ever seen. If you don't believe that women's addiction to attention is the same as men's necessity for sex, you don't understand. And so the ability to garner attention, the idea, if you go into that, men's ability, you even talked about getting a DSLR and becoming a photographer. Men's ability.
Or at least portraying yourself.
Yeah, portraying yourself as it was called men with cameras. That's what women call them, guy with camera.
I see.
The ability to garner attention as an attraction trigger.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like I think you said it very, very well.
Yeah.
I mean, so I talk about this in the book, that the more powerful person in a sexual relationship is generally the one, among other things, who has more options. And how men and women cultivate optionality is different. Men cultivate optionality by being visibly competent.
Yeah.
Women cultivate their optionality by being visibly attractive.
Yes.
So they got the attractive part down if they're in the club and they got the makeup and the cocktail dresses and whatnot. They're missing the visible part. And that's what a man who has command over an audience can provide to her.
Yes.
So this is sort of a dangerous game, because by making her attractiveness more public, on some level, he's inviting a greater swath of intrasexual competition.
Yes. It's P. Diddy getting Cassie to cheat on her boyfriend with P. Diddy. Like, it's that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. I don't know about that stuff. But
I love it. Explaining the Diddy trial to Orion. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The last time I was on Fresh and Fit, it was the day that the Diddy indictment came down, and we spent 40 minutes talking about this. And then Myron turned to me and said, "Orion, what do you think about this?" I said, "Bro, I have no idea." Man. Is P. Diddy a rapper? It's like, it was just not the right guest for that moment.
Yeah, that's one thing I do appreciate, is the fact that you don't really, like, I am heavily influenced by like Chris Williamson, Patrick Bet-David, Jocko Willink, and all these other guys, Diary of a CEO, like all these.
I know those names. I know those guys.
Yeah, but I still, because I'm always looking, like, I think Chris Williamson has the best audio I've ever heard in my life. Like if you're in his studio, it's absolutely incredible. Like I'm always trying to take these little pieces from these other guys to try to improve. Soft White Underbelly, I notice their questions, they ask these very open-ended questions. He asks these very open-ended questions, very short. It's off camera, so you can't even hear him because he's not mic'd up, and then you just run with it, right?
Yeah, if you want someone to open up, you ask open-ended questions for sure.
Yes. There's another one I want to talk about, which is kind of a paramount subject for me, which we call it pre-selection. You talk about women want what other women want.
Of course.
As an attraction trigger.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because women have a limited amount of time,
Yeah.
as we all do, but women's time might be even more valuable given their shorter reproductive windows in the sexual marketplace. And as I said, it's very difficult to truly determine the value of a man. It certainly takes time, and there has to be a certain level of interest in order to take the time to determine that. And most women are not going to be willing or able to do that. So one of the proxies for a man's attractiveness is the number of other women and their attractiveness who seem to be pursuing or interested in that man.
Yes.
Because you can kind of assume, it's not necessarily true, because these things are subject to faddishness and like hive mind, mass psychosis, as it were. But you can assume that if a bunch of women are pursuing a man, at least one of them has taken the time to do the due diligence into that person.
Yeah.
And she's determined that this is a man worth pursuing, and so I might as well piggyback on her hard work.
Yeah.
On some level, it's why men who get married and begin to exhibit the ring tend to get more female attraction than they've ever had when they were
studies
single.
on this are like 30% more attractive if the man
30%.
is taken. Yeah, one study, it's like 59% to 91%.
Because there's at least one woman in the world who said that this man is the best that I can fucking get.
Yes, he's functional, competency-wise, in bed, all these other places. At least she's putting her seal of approval on it, yes.
And sometimes it's easier to recruit from the competition than to train someone from the beginning, as it were.
And it creates this, I'm trying to think, this almost like paradox where I will listen to women say, I don't like guys that have a lot of girls around, and yet they wouldn't have noticed that guy in the first place. Again, I use this example. My ex-girlfriend's she's a world champion bikini model, and she met me at a bikini competition that I was the host of, and then complained about the fact that there were women all around, not recognizing the irony of what she was saying, and the fact that so many women around, while it annoyed her, was also contributing to the attraction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there were guys at that event that didn't have a bunch of women circulating around them, and she didn't notice them, to your point earlier with the busser. But I can understand why she wouldn't like it, because those folks, they're useful before they engage your attention, because it's like, oh, this is where I should put my attention. I should look at Michael or this man.
Yeah.
So thank you, ladies. But after I succeed in securing your attention, these women are just threats. All they can do is potentially detract from our relationship and siphon off resources, generally, attention, sex, money. So let's get rid of those women as quickly as possible. Absolutely. They've done their duty.
Yeah. Would you say the part women leave out? That is part of the part women leave out, is the idea that I'm attracted to this guy. It's whenever I hear women complaining about guys who are players, like we talked about before, the bartender that they all slept with, that all these girls slept with, but it's like, well, then you guys all had sex with this guy, but you're still complaining about him. It's the part that women leave out. Attraction is the most important thing. It has to come before everything else.
You got to put it before everything else as a guy, if you want to get with women.
One of the ones I really enjoyed you talking about was there was a women transitioning to men. I guess there's a YouTube channel on it. And when they took the testosterone, they're like, I understand men now.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a whole channel, maybe there is, but I've watched some interviews.
Yeah.
Just Google F2MT or testosterone, and they suddenly have a great deal more compassion for men. It's like, how do they do this? And on some level, the sexual craving is a terrible monkey on one's back. I mean, there's that stereotype that men think about sex every 7 seconds. And that probably was true when I was younger. I've gotten some blessed relief from that.
We'll get you on TRT.
Everything, I'm doing just fine right these days. I don't actually need to think about women every 7 seconds.
Of course, yeah.
Like, I can understand why women can be interested in so many things. You know, they're interested in macrame, and they're interested in brunch, and they're interested in this, that, or the other. It's like they're not just thinking about getting laid all the time. So these people were also reporting that they were focusing on certain parts of women, their breasts, their asses, and things like that. So testosterone seems to make secondary sexual characteristics more relevant in the perception.
Yeah.
So it clearly seems to change some very deep brain neural networks, because perception is a deep one, and it's almost entirely unconscious.
Yeah.
They also don't have a refractory period, which is why they think that it's somewhat torture, is that they're horny, they're thinking about sex all the time, but they get no relief from actually having sex.
That's really interesting. That's a really interesting idea. I think it also points out to, I think a lot of times, women, when they're trying to understand men, don't understand what testosterone does to our brains in comparison to having a lot less of it. Also the risk taking. 40% of men throughout history have reproduced, which means, and 80% of women, which means for reproduction for women is not a function of risk. They don't have to, if they're beautiful, they don't have to risk to get a man.
If they're not beautiful, it's like they're more likely someone's going to swoop in and take care of that woman.
Yeah, it's historically, it's unlikely for a woman, even if she's unattractive, to not be pregnant at some point in her life through evolutionary. In fact, I believe it was like 74,000 years ago, all of humanity can be traced back to 6,000 breeding women, something like that.
I think it has to do with the surviving the last ice age, which might have been around 10 or 12,000 years ago. And I think the human population dipped below like 100,000 folks at some point.
I think that was a different time. There was 1.7 thousand years ago, I believe there was 17 women breeding for every one man. Some crazy number like that. Yeah, it was William Costello brought that up. I thought it was insane.
Did that have to do with the fact that they lived in just sort of small kingdoms where there was one powerful alpha who was
could be that, or a lot of men going off to war when they're very young, something like that. Just the problem of surplus men. And it is for societies, historically, it was a problem of like, if men at the top wanted to be polygynous, then there were men at the bottom who had to be left behind.
Sure.
Right. And so then what do you do with those men? You send them off to war, right? And then when you ask
one way to do it,
these ancestral tribes, I believe Jared Diamond writes a book about this, where he goes over the anthropologist at UCLA. And in the book, he talks about Yanomamos, he talks about Inuit Indians, Aboriginals. Why do you guys go to war? Well, we go to war to get a wife, right? And then you ask Americans, like, why do you Americans go to war? It's like, we go to war to serve our country. And the Aboriginals laugh. They're like, what are you talking about?
They kind of have to. I mean, if you're in a small tribe, you do need some genetic diversity.
Yeah.
So either you do some trade and you're more of a peaceful tribe with your neighbors, or it's rating for wife swapping on some level.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You see couples.
No, I don't.
You don't see couples.
No.
I thought, okay, you just see
individuals. But I see men and women.
Meet men and women.
Yeah.
There was something you said about 99% of the relationships where you see them, the woman is in charge.
Yeah, and this is just not only professionally, but in my own personal life.
Got it.
Among all of my friends and family, it's like the woman is the more powerful person in the vast majority of marriages that I personally seen.
Yes. Is there a possibility the reason why you see couples where 99% of the time the woman's in charge is because the couples where men are in charge are less likely to come see you?
It's quite possible. Like I've said that I've seen thousands of marriages up close, both personally and professionally, and I can count on one hand the number of marriages that I wouldn't mind being in. And what all of those marriages have in common is the man is the more powerful.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't hear you talk about that part, so that's really interesting.
I haven't said that before.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, I think, a pill for some people to swallow, but I do believe that in general, men leading in a relationship is better for women and men.
Sure. I talk about that on the channel. And in the book, using the idea of the balance of attraction, where there is the adored and the adorer. And in general, I think it's better for the women to be the adorer and for men to be the adored.
Yes.
And there's more power and control in being the adored.
Yeah, the way I say the exact same thing. Women already have this almost escape hatch of all this other attention that they get from men. On top of, so let's just say her SMV, just in a vacuum, she has more sexual market value, especially if she's younger or attractive. And then on top of that, he likes her more than she likes him. Now she has 2 points of leverage in the relationship. Whereas if she's more into him than he's into her, then it kind of balances things out. And the relationships where I see that work, it's it's at least 51-49 where she's a little bit more into him than the other way around because she just has more optionality from being a female.
Well, the other argument that I make about this is that it's the adorer, whoever that is, who gets the lion's share of emotional experience in the relationship.
Yes.
Because the adorer gets to be with the one they love. The adorer just gets to be loved by the one they're with, which is a very attenuated emotional experience.
Yeah.
And I make the argument that everyone, men and women, or most people, would prefer to be the adorer. They want to be with the one they love. That's the greatest victory in the realm of love and relationships, is to get the one that you want.
Yeah.
And there's no greater thrill and no more painful heartbreak associated with either succeeding or failing in that regard.
Yeah.
And men and women go to relationships to feel, but I do think it's a more important component for women. If they feel nothing, they're more likely to not give that guy a second date. The guy might think, yeah, it was an okay date, but maybe we just need some time to get to know each other and we might have some commonalities. We could probably make it work. No, I didn't feel a spark. There was no chemistry. I'm not going to waste any time. And I think it's an important component for women to remain in their relationships. It's more often the case.
To be the adorer.
Yes. I think that it's more likely that a woman is going to say, I fell out of love, and therefore this relationship is no longer valuable to me, than the other way around.
Yeah.
Men can fall out of love too, but I think they might be more willing to stay out of a sense of duty or responsibility. But when the emotions aren't present or they leave, most women are looking for the door.
Yeah.
Duty or obligation is generally not enough to keep them.
Yeah. Two stats that kind of paint what you're talking about is the study where they go over, you brought this up before, men who cheat and men who don't cheat show the same level of marital satisfaction. When women cheat, it's about 83% of the time they show a lack of satisfaction in the marriage, or they're less satisfied in the marriage, which also means 17% of the time women are just having sex to have sex.
It's true, yeah.
Right. That combined with the fact that 80% of divorces are initiated by women kind of paints the picture of what you're saying. Men cheat and they don't intend to leave their wives.
Oh, no.
When they do so, yeah.
Much to the dismay of their mistresses often.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a bunch of girls like, he's going to leave his wife. And I'm like, man, I don't think you understand what that means.
I think I have an episode that's forthcoming about this called Male Cheating and Female Cheating. It hasn't been published yet.
Yeah.
But I think that has to do with, I think, men's superior ability to compartmentalize. Like a man can say, I love my wife and I fuck other women, and it's not a paradox.
Not only is it not a paradox, if you had 100 other men in here and said, can a man love his wife and fuck other women? All of us be like, yeah, that sounds about right. And you'd have a bunch of women in there be like, I can't believe you said that out loud.
Yeah.
That's horribly offensive. How do you, and then the next thing is, you're condoning cheating. I was like, that's not what I said. We're not condoning cheating. We're just saying, could a man do those two things? And we know it to be true. Yes.
Sure, yeah.
And it's a fundamental thing. I never have trouble explaining this concept to men. Often I have this problem with women where they're like, what do you mean he can cheat and then want to be with someone else? Another thing I thought I really enjoyed you talking about was Mack and Murphy often goes over these statistics where women want men who are about 2 or 3 years older than them on average, and that this idea that men being in their prime in their 30s and 40s is like a cope, and that's not real. And then you mentioned before, you thought that men in their 40s are actually in their prime. I agree with you. I mean, being a guy who's in his 40s and dating a lot of younger women, I think what you're saying sounds a little bit more accurate. Where do you think this disconnect comes from? Where I feel like I hear a lot of social scientists being like, no, women don't want men that are much older. And then I look at Leonardo DiCaprio on The Rock and I'm like, that doesn't seem to match up.
Well, I think that I don't know where Murphy is getting his arguments from, but if you look at the straight marriage statistics, it's like there's not a huge age disparity in the age at first marriage between men and women. In the United States, I think it's less than 2 years.
Yeah.
In some cultures, interestingly, with lower GDPs, I think this might be correlated, there's a higher average age disparity between men and women at first marriage, which is kind of interesting to look into that. Probably because older men have a greater share of the limited resources available in society.
Yeah.
So I think it, again, would fit with the hypergamous hypergamous model and the economic model.
There's an evolutionary psychology study that in every society they checked, as men grew in the socioeconomic ladder, the difference in age between them and their wife increased. And the other part of it was if the GDP was lower, then the difference in age between them and their wife increased.
But think of it like this. Again, this kind of goes to our idea of assortative mating, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes I get those words wrong.
Yeah.
Let's say that Leonardo DiCaprio were to come out publicly say, I've proposed to a woman and she's 55 years old.
Yeah.
Don't we think that would be kind of peculiar?
How we thought when Clooney got married to the lawyer. You remember? Clooney
No.
got married to like 40-year-old like civil rights attorney.
But wasn't he like in his 60s at that point?
I don't know. I think late 50s. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I think at least in his 60s.
Yeah.
I think that Clooney became a very late husband and an even later father.
Yeah.
So we actually might think that it's more strange when a rich, famous, handsome man chooses an age-appropriate wife.
Macron, the prime minister of France, his wife is 25 years older than him.
25 years older?
Yeah, so he was 15 years old, and she was his 39-year-old teacher when they started dating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well-
she's 75, I think, and he's 47. Maybe I got the dates wrong. She's 70-something.
Older women
Yeah.
are good. I have an episode about that, younger men and older women, and why do they tend to get together? It's
Yeah.
because they actually have comparable sexual marketplace values.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Is that there's nothing necessarily wrong with young men, it's just that most women don't want them.
Yeah.
And there's nothing necessarily wrong with older women, it's just that most men don't want them. And
Yeah.
so on some level, they're on equal power levels on the distribution curve. The younger men might be coming up and the older women might be coming down, but for the time that they're together, they're somewhat comparable and they can do business with one another. And older women can be wonderful partners for younger men.
Yeah.
Like I'm very grateful to some of the older women that I dated in my early 20s.
I remember that in my early 20s. Yeah.
They were awesome.
They
They still have a special
tons of
place in my heart.
experience. Yes. Yeah, but what I just feel, so it kind of leads to my next point, which was when you talk about the sexual marketplace, it seems to be older women don't have a problem with it. Younger women certainly don't have a problem with it. And men don't have a problem with this idea. But it's middle-aged women who seem to have a problem
They're
with
my
the
biggest critics,
yeah,
for sure.
The middle sexual marketplace. Why would that be?
Well, I think that no one surrenders power willingly.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. And why do younger women tend not to have a problem? Because in the economic model, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to argue that the average younger man is more powerful or more attractive than the average younger woman.
Yeah.
Like the average woman's sexual marketplace value is much, in their 20s, is much higher than the average man's sexual marketplace value. And no women are protesting for equality under those circumstances.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And we could say that after, later in life, and they get into their grandmotherly roles and they've accepted that they've aged and this is a new chapter in their life, they can see things a little bit more objectively. But in the middle, it's a loss of power. It's a loss of privilege that in many respects was unearned. We talk about unearned privilege in recent years. It's like that woman just had her genes mixed up in a certain way. Clearly, she took care of herself. She knew how to apply the makeup and to dress a certain way. But like a lot of that was kind of done for her. And now she's not getting the same kind of attention and privileges and power than she once enjoyed. And that would be difficult, I think, for any human being to experience.
Yeah, the loss of power.
The loss of power.
I've heard it said one way, it's like she feels like she lost power, but she didn't. She's just treated like a man now.
Yeah. All women eventually get the experience of being a man if they live long enough.
Yeah, it is really interesting. When you go back to the idea, what I've seen before is when I ask women in their 20s, do you think it's appropriate to date a guy who's in their mid-30s or 40s? They seem to not have that big of a problem with it. And even if they don't like it, they don't seem to have a big deal with it. The age appropriateness seems to come from middle-aged women saying, why are you a 40-year-old man dating a 20-year-old woman? That's creepy. You're grooming her. It seems to come from that cohort more so. When I talk to the young, attractive women, they're like, yeah, I don't have a problem dating a 40-year-old.
Well, they might not be able to beat out their younger intersexual competition. And so,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that's...
so we're shaming the male desire in order to potentially disqualify those women from consideration so that she can, be a more attractive option to that particular man. I don't think that works.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be a very small cohort of good men who are going to respond to that kind of shameful feedback and say, oh, is that true? Okay, well, thanks for letting me know. I'll do the right thing. But that doesn't really change attraction, which again is not experienced as a conscious choice in men and women.
Yeah. One of the best things I heard you talk about off the idea of intersexual dynamics. I have a speech I have with some of my business partners. I tell them in the beginning, no matter how successful you become, I'm always going to cheer for you. No matter how many, if you date every hot girl I've ever liked, I'm always going to be on your side. And you mentioned this before, friends, it's easier to console your friends when you're down versus feeling happiness for them when they have success.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
The success of a peer is an affront to one's vanity.
Yeah.
Like, there's been a lot of folks who I think might secretly be waiting for my downfall on some level, you know? Because to them, I'm just I'm just Orion, and maybe they've enjoyed a more positive social status to me historically, and this is an affront to their egos or their vanity.
I think you have to catch yourself. I truly, I was talking to James Sexton earlier this week, and he's like, oh, yeah, I'm doing Patrick Bet-David, then Chris Williamson, and then maybe Joe Rogan, and then Softball.
He's killing it these days. He's on fire.
And then I'm thinking to myself, it's like, man, that's awesome. That sounds great. But then I think about, dude, number one, he is my friend. He's awesome. He's just a great dude who gives terrific advice, not just on marriage. And then number two, the more mainstream you and he become, the less shit I have to deal with. I really love the fact, I feel like you've opened the door in a lot of cases to me having a mainstream discussion about things that were taboo before.
Cool.
And that's why I really pull for you guys. And so, yeah, but it is one of these things where I've noticed friends back in high school, not super happy with me, kind of biting, talking shit behind my back. And then I'm like, do I do that? And I always try to catch myself because I never want to be that person.
It's something that is something of a habit.
Yeah.
Like, did you play sports as a kid?
Yes.
What sports did you play?
Football, basketball, wrestling, and track.
Okay, so you got a couple of team sports in there. And remember after the game, whether you win or lost, you had to go out and shake the other team's hand. And didn't sometimes you not want to fucking do that?
Yeah, I got into, there was a huge brawl several times after football games.
Because I don't think that's the natural response of any child to be like, well, you know, the better man won, and thanks for giving me a good game, chum. Yeah. So that's when we lose, we're petulant, we're angry, we're upset, maybe we're crying for boys. You know, it's like that's the natural tendency in people is not to feel happy for the ones who beat us or are ahead of us or are our betters. But we cultivate that habit in children so that we can like navigate in society where there's always going to be a bigger fish. Yes. You know what I'm saying? So I do think that there could be a natural organic tendency towards envy in human beings when they see a perceived equal doing better than them.
Yeah.
So what you should start doing, even if you don't feel it, is to say, man, congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
It's like going back on the field when you were a kid and shaking the opposing team's hand after you got trounced.
Yeah.
It's going to feel not very authentic. It's going to feel bad, but it'll cultivate a habit that will destroy envy from taking root in your heart, which is one of the best things that you can do as a successful man.
The best things. Because it's something that I noticed, especially working in nightlife. If I surpass someone, it was just nothing but biting, talking shit to my girlfriend. It was just one of the wildest things I'd ever seen. And then I was like, I never want to be that guy. I always want to be supportive. There's certain guys that are coaches in my program. One of my coaches graduated from Harvard last Thursday. And I could absolutely see a world where he's a way bigger influencer than me. And in my mind, I have to stop and say, I'm good with that. I want that. I want that success and happiness for other people. And also recognize that I'm going to feel envy sometimes. And that's okay. But I can't transcend it unless I accept it. Unless I accept that I have that feeling.
You certainly have to accept it. There's a really fantastic article I read once on the varieties of envy. And their argument was that there are 4 varieties and 3 of them are destructive, but one of them can actually be a positive force. They called it emulative envy. It has to do with the fact that, yes, you are my superior, you're my better, you're doing better than me, but we're both going after a non-zero-sum good. So it's not like only one of us can be successful. We can both be successful. We can both be rich. There's enough success and riches to go around. So that has to be one of the components. And the second is I have to have enough self-efficacy to think that if I applied myself, I could be as successful as you.
Yes.
And so they call it emulative envy, which is basically like a role model or a friendly rivalry that urges you through the presence of the superior person to like manifest more of your own potential to compete successfully. It's like, on some level, that's what got me to kick my own ass into gear in my late 20s.
Yes.
Is that I was still kind of a burnt out actor. My life wasn't really going anywhere. But I saw my friends, and this guy became a doctor, and this guy became a lawyer, and this guy was buying a house and getting married. And I was like, I know those jokers. They're not any better than me. If they can do it, I can fucking do it.
One of the craziest experiences is when I go back and see guys that were in my units when I was in the military, and some of them were being promoted to full bird colonel. And I'm like, dude, I remember this guy being pissed drunk, like falling out of a bar, and he's in charge of a base. He's a wing commander.
Well, maybe a lot's changed in the ensuing.
Well, of course that is. But in my mind, we're all still stupid kids running around just like acting crazy, drawing dicks on each other's face while they fall asleep. This is the military. Forgive me. It was the military. And it's like, this guy's an 06 wing commander and he's got 3 kids and he'll write me every once in a while. And it's like, how's life going? I was like, it's very different. But yeah, I will tell you from a business standpoint, wanting success for everyone in my business, even if it meant that they do better than me, has been something that I believe, at least I hope, has created a culture in my business where people want to stay. They want to stay, and they're not, because I really do encourage other people. Like I'm trying to get other people in my program to start their own podcast, to become the face of the program as well. And in doing so, I have to step back and say, if you do better than me, I'm still pulling for you. Right? That's definitely the best way to do it. But the other one is male-female jealousy. When you like a girl and she likes your friend, this is really hard to do, but if you can pull that one off, I mean, that to me is enlightenment, right? Because that's a big one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, especially if it really is a friend, and at that stage, you're probably not that emotionally invested in that woman anyway. I mean,
just a girl you had a crush on. For instance, I've had a situation before where I started seeing a girl that came on my podcast, and my friend beforehand had told me he was very much attracted to her, and then I started seeing her. Like that kind of thing.
Well, it really is the most rational, self-interested move to make.
Yeah.
Because if you accept the fact that this girl is not attracted to you, you're not going to get with her regardless of whether you support your friend or not. Like, you're not going to get with her because she doesn't want you, dude, right?
Yeah.
So there's one outcome where she doesn't want you and you support your friend, and that relationship at least maintains, if not improves. Or you also don't get the girl and you're a bad friend and you lose that relationship as well.
Yeah.
Like, that's stupid. So on some level, the ability to navigate your envy is actually the most self-interested thing that you could possibly do.
Yeah. And also to dispassionately look at that guy and say, what did he do right? Not what do he have that I don't have, but it's like, what did he do right? One of the things that helped me get better with attracting women than anything else was watching men who are doing well and then just saying, what is the mechanism they're using in order to generate attraction, instead of looking at them with envy. And that was a big transition for me, was being able to do that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand that they're looking at someone else through the lens of envy.
Yes.
But they generally are when they say, oh, she's just a slut.
Yeah.
Or she just dresses like that for attention.
Yeah.
Or that dude he probably has a small dick because of the way that he's acting.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, that's unconscious envy manifesting through perception.
Yeah. This is a big topic that I talk about a lot on the show, and this is the concept of how therapy in general seems to have a place for women that's different than for men. And I just wonder if you can go with the idea 95% of therapists under the age of 30 are female.
Oh, shit.
There are more, and then we can go into other, this isn't exactly therapy, but this is Richard Reeves, he talks about this, more female military pilots than there are male kindergarten teachers. But it goes to how elementary school in primary education, how there's so much, they're being taught by females, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but there are studies that show that boys do better when they're educated by other men. And then when it comes to therapy, there's certain things that maybe men don't want to share with women. That's one idea. And then the other idea is the things that help, you brought this up before. I'm a therapist and I'm trying to help a woman who's going through a breakup. Her talking through her feelings might legitimately be a way to solve the problem of depression. But for a man, it might be better for him to go lift weights, for him to go do something with his friends, for him to go accomplish a goal with other men.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general, women tend to prefer emotional coping strategies and men tend to prefer problem-solving strategies.
Yeah.
That's why I've tended to have more interest in my services when they're branded as consultations than therapy, especially in certain demographics of men. Like black men do not go to therapy, like on a population level, but they will go to seek out coaching or consultations, for instance. So is this merely a marketing thing? Not necessarily, because as I talk about in the fine print, a consultation is really about time-limited, action-oriented advice. The idea here is let's collaboratively define the problem, propose some potential solutions, and get the fuck out of my office. And hopefully I never see you again because they work. If not, we can come back. Hopefully it moved the ball down the field. We can see where the new bottleneck is and iterate until the problem is gone. And I think that is a useful model for men and maybe not as useful for women.
Yes.
What is interesting, I haven't talked about this before, but I read an article recently with the explosion of AI models like ChatGPT. One of the most common uses of ChatGPT is like as a friend or a therapist. Like people are talking to AI models.
Grok has the therapy thing that's just built into it now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's really interesting because, there might be something to that. Maybe we don't even need another human being to say, that sounds really hard, Michael. But I think that you're pretty brave for having gone through something like that.
Yeah.
Like if we may not need a human to reflect and validate, though those are useful therapeutic interventions from time to time.
Well, I think the issue, and it may be more complicated than this, but the issue is men, you talked about men have to be the captains, women can be the captains or the passengers. If men have to be the captains, then that means men have a burden of performance. So your therapist telling you anything other than you need to solve the problem, you're fat. That's why your wife left you. You brought up the one idea, any therapist who doesn't look at exercise and diet is basically negligent. Like you're overweight. That could be a function of your depression.
Sure.
Whereas if I have a female therapist and I'm an overweight woman who doesn't want to tell me this, then that becomes a problem because she's not doing anything to help me. So that's one issue that I see, is that the therapist has to understand the man always has a burden of performance.
But a lot of therapists would say, well, isn't that just an example of toxic gender norms? And you've internalized these terrible ideas about masculinity. Can't you just be a human being?
Exactly.
Why are you always a human doing, Michael?
I have to make money to take care of my wife and family because of toxic gender norms. It's what I'm saying, a fundamental misunderstanding. Unless you have a burden of performance or understand that who you're talking to has a burden of performance, then it won't make any sense. And here's the other thing. Women talking about their feelings, like it genuinely does make them feel better. I've seen it. You've probably seen it several times. But like when you and I have conversations like off the air, I'm helping you. Like we've had a conversation about our business. Whenever I'm with my friends, I'm always trying to solve problems for them. Maybe that's the way I express love and affection for someone else, is by making their lives easier. Maybe my ancestor in the tribe, he expressed love and affection, not by crying or writing poetry, but by building fortification and protecting his family and his tribe from predation. Maybe that's the way so if you understand that, then that means it's two different languages. And if the therapist wants to treat me like a defective woman and say, you don't express yourself enough, when in reality, I am doing what you want, but in a different way by solving the problem, that seems to be there's a fundamental misunderstanding there.
I would agree. And I would say that there is a time and a place for men to talk about their stories and to make sense of their feelings as well, especially if they've gone through something really traumatic.
Yes. Yeah. That I've definitely seen that before. You remember the show Billions? Have you ever seen that show? There was in-house therapists at the hedge fund, Axe Capital, but they were performance coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they don't care about your feelings to the extent that they don't impact the bottom line. And if you're not creating the outcomes that the organization prefers, they're going to facilitate a transition to get you the support that you need far away from your desk.
Yeah. That's really important. And then also, going through your book, the the analogy about the ship. And so the men can either be captains, or men can only be captains. The way society views men, they can only be captains. Women can be captains or passengers. And then the concept of the mutiny. It's just that's why, by the way, your book is required reading for all my clients now.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that analogy is really important for guys to understand because, I've had a conversation with Richard Reeves and I watch a lot of Scott Galloway, and both of them talk about a point where their wives made more money than them. And during that point, the wife was the breadwinner and maybe they had to do a little bit more of the childcare. Both of them have expressed this idea. But in that point, my counter to that is both of you were also super successful academicians who are authors. Like even though your wife made more money than you, you were still someone to look up to. And I think, and then eventually the men both made more money in those relationships. But one of the things Richard Reeves talks about is that the society needs to be more accepting of the stay-at-home dad who makes less money than the wife. And my response to that is, if society is not accepting of that, it's not men. It's women who are not accepting of that. When men make less money than their wives, the divorce rate skyrockets. And we see this over and over again. So if there's a problem in this area where men can only be captains and women can be captains and passengers, it's because women are enforcing that stereotype.
And why would that be the case if relationships weren't transactional?
Yes.
And why would that be the case if the transaction were not the exchange of resources for sexual opportunity?
Yeah.
I mean, clearly they had enough resources between the two of them. And clearly the men were good enough to marry and to commit to up until that point.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. Were these men suddenly toxic husbands? Were they abusive fathers? Like, why would the divorce rate shoot up under those conditions?
Yeah.
Unless it were disrupting the underlying transaction at the heart of sexual relationship.
I'm sure you've heard James Sexton talk about the man loses his job and the woman files for divorce before he even knows what's going on. She says he's talked about these situations where the man is like, hey, I've lost some money or whatever, and she's already draining the bank account, contacting, trying to conflict out every single divorce attorney in Manhattan. He's told me these stories. I'm like,
Chris Rock has a bit. You lose your job. The woman might not leave right away, but the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
I feel like the only two groups of people who see clearly into sexual relationships these days are either evolutionary psychologists or stand-up comedians.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And the stand-up comedians know so much more about the truth of what really occurs in dynamics between men and women than a lot of clinical psychologists.
Yeah, agreed. So this is so you said this on my show, and I never heard anyone say this. You said saying the quiet part loud. I've stolen that. I say that. I use that all the time.
I don't know if I invented it. I don't know where I heard it, but.
And then the other part that I loved was you talked about like dissecting the human body 600 years ago, how it was seen as a transgression.
Sure.
It's like there's obviously things we need to know about the digestive tract and the gallbladder, but it was gross or unappealing or unholy for us to do that. And it
was sacrilege.
Sacrilege.
It was against the sacredness of the human body.
Yes.
It wasn't just a machine. It was a spiritual entity. And we desecrated it by performing autopsies.
And you conduct a moral transgression by investigating it so thoroughly.
Yeah.
And then you use that analogy also when you talk about relationships.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think there's a similar crisis, just like there were health crises in the Middle Ages and today as well, but they were stymied in their solutions by this superstition around investigating the human body empirically and objectively. We had these ideas that were preventing us from learning more about how things really work, and therefore, how can we get them back on track when they go awry? And I think the same thing happens in relationships. We're not supposed to think too much about it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thought-terminating cliches when it comes to relationships and the troubles that people experience. Just love each other more.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. Just be a good person and love each other. It's like, but what does that even mean? Like, what do I actually do with my hands with that information?
Yeah.
What actionable steps do I take? What does it mean to love? Do we both consider love to mean the same thing? Like you just got done talking about how love can be expressed differentially between men and women.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it just learning each other's love languages? I don't really like that term, but it's clearly the case that people receive and accept affection differentially.
Yes.
But love is really about giving. It's not about feeling anything or receiving. Love is about self-sacrifice in the service of others, which is why it's so rare.
So when you look at that, if I'm an attractive woman, do I really have to look at the inner workings of a relationship thoroughly in order to get into one? But if I'm an unattractive man, pickup artists, seduction community. It's like the investigation of it has, like, it's going to be done more so by men, whereas attractive women, it's going to feel, this is a really weird analogy, but I'm gonna see if you could follow along with this. I have dated several women who like to date women with me. So we've had like their
Thruples or just threesomes?
No, not thruples, just threesomes.
Okay.
And it's really interesting, the dichotomy, because of what happens. So I met her and I knew where we were going to the restaurant, had everything planned out. A housekeeper just left my apartment to make it smell a certain way, candles, like none of this was organic. I planned all this out, and she had an amazing organic experience, which then led to us starting a sexual relationship. Okay. Now she's like, I'm really interested in women. So we go to meet, go talk to a girl, meet her in a club or whatever. And she's like, she wants it to feel organic. But then I explained to her, I was like, that's not how this works. Like, we have to get her away from that creepy dude who's trying to talk to her. We've got to get back to the car, like all these things that we have to do. And she doesn't understand. So she's seeing it now from both sides. From her side, everything felt organic. So she thought that her relationship with this woman would be organic. And it usually takes about 2 or 3 times. It's like, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, we literally have to take control of the situation and plan everything out logistically. And then she sees it from the other side when she's trying to attract a woman.
Sure. It's like the difference between going to Disneyland as a tourist and being involved in the behind-the-scenes production of all the rides.
Or coming to Vegas as a tourist and then living here. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it's very, very different, for sure.
But yeah, the experience, the organic experience, so like I said before, for women, because it feels so organic, because they're the one who's adored, right? They're the ones who's being pursued for sexual access in the beginning. There's no need to, why are you looking so hard, bro? Why are you trying so hard? This is so hard. And then as men, it's like, yo, I'm 22. Nobody wants me. What do? I don't understand. How did that guy get the girl? My mom told me to be a nice guy, but this guy who's an asshole got the hot girl. I'm so confused. So now I have to go and look at it very closely. And God forbid you get so close that you actually discover some level of truth. And that truth exposes things like hypergamy. Then it's like, why are you trying so hard, bro? Why are you looking so hard? You've committed a moral transgression by looking so closely and scientifically at a relationship, just like the moral transgression of dissecting the body.
That's correct. That's my analogy.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's also an insult that women give against like successful pickup artists. In fact, the more successful the men are, the more pathetic that they try to make them seem.
I'm sitting right here, man. I'm right here.
How you just couldn't get laid. You were so such a loser that you had to learn all of these tips and tricks. It's like, well, kind of, yeah, because if I were successful, I probably wouldn't have made the effort.
Yes.
Just as if I were a beautiful woman who could just go on the experience on rails and it feels very organic. So I say that a lot of men, most men start at the bottom of every social hierarchy in life.
Yeah.
And that's a very difficult place to be. Women don't want you. You're not useful to other men. It's lonely and alienating. But you don't have to stay there, and you can do something about it. It takes a shit ton of work and effort and talent and grit and determination, but after 10 years, you might have something worth sharing with others.
Mm-hmm.
And more than anything else, it's how can I be attractive to women and secure better and more sexual opportunities?
Yeah.
And to that end, some men decide to get PhDs in women.
Yeah.
But a lot of women, it's hard pressed to get them to take like a weekend course at a community college on men. Why? Because they aren't struggling with optionality. They're not struggling to get what they want. But if they were, they would learn.
Yeah.
And I do think that's kind of how things used to be. I don't know why or when exactly it switched, but in a lot of the old literature, it was the women who were pursuing the men.
Yeah.
Like the stereotyped topper to the wedding cake is the woman dragging the man to the altar.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And in that era, the women had to, like, how can I catch a man? They had to use their wiles on some level.
Well, maybe it's because there was more disproportionate degrees of wealth. Meaning, like, what you're seeing is not them chasing the man; they're chasing the lord or the duke of the. You know what I'm saying? Or
they're still chasing resources.
They're chasing resources.
But now they have more of their own resources, so they don't have to chase as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's leading to a decrease in all kinds of sexual relationships between men and women. I talk about that in chapter 12 of the book.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. We're not going to disenfranchise women. We're not going to bar them from the professional marketplace. So if one more reason why men and women couple, i.e. the exchange of resources, is taken away, then there's going to be fewer relationships transacted between men and women.
Which is what we're seeing now.
Yeah, absolutely.
As women make, Title IX, in 1972, I believe, it was 14 percentage points more men getting college degrees, bachelor's degrees than women. And in 2019, it was 15 percentage points more women getting it
Only
than men.
15? I'm surprised it's that low.
Now it's even higher. And so because of that, you're going to have more women making more money. As more women make more money, they want men who make even more money than that.
Yeah.
So the social scientist, what he was preaching was that if we just we took the handcuffs off these women and let them make more money than men, then they would stop desiring rich men. That is what the social scientists believed. And then when we look in countries where it's a little bit more egalitarian as far as wages are concerned, like say the Norwegian or Scandinavian countries, you find that the women want men who make even more money. Beyonce or Rihanna being worth $100 million dating a billionaire, like that kind of thing. So when women made more money, they wanted men who made even more money, and that pool got even smaller. And thereby we get the three genders: high status men, women, and low status men.
And those men, their whole unconscious goal of becoming successful was to increase their sexual optionality.
Yes.
And so now that they have
even
it,
if they didn't recognize it, that's why.
what I'm saying. It's unconscious. And the idea that they're going to forego all of this optionality to enter into an exclusive sexual arrangement with any one woman is very low. And so that's what's making society increasingly polygamous, is that a smaller proportion of men are enjoying a greater lion's share of all sexual experiences. But those men, because of their increased optionality, it's now more expensive for them to forego that in favor of any one exclusive arrangement.
Yes.
And it's just going to continue to trend in that direction.
You said it before, women want what other women want. Well, if that's part of hypergamy, if that is the case, then you, like what you said before, we're going to end up in the inevitable conclusion is
polygamy.
Polygamy.
Because the vast majority of natural communities that have existed on this planet have been polygamous.
Yes.
Monogamy has to be enforced, and it tends to be enforced by patriarchal structures.
I think we're specifically talking about polygyny, like multiple women with one man, right?
Yes.
Yes. Well, polygamy, because polygamy
literally means marriage. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to understand. So polyamory is both genders can see multiple people, and I believe polygyny is specifically one man with multiple women.
Yes, I think polygamy is that.
Yeah.
The gamy means marriage, just like hypergamy, right?
Yeah.
So the polygyny.
Well, the gamy, I believe, is woman in Greek, isn't it?
Well, gyno.
Yeah.
Right, is woman in Greek.
Yeah. So, but like you said before, the natural result in the end is going to be a small group of men having a bunch of experiences. It's like the natural, but then the part we just keep forgetting is these men at the bottom who have none, and it's growing.
Yeah, and they develop strange adaptations. And
Yes.
you see that in all kinds of primate communities.
Yeah.
And even rodent communities as well, where beta or low status males spontaneously adopt all kinds of strange behavioral strategies in order to stay sexually competitive.
Yeah. This is a great topic, and it's something I talk about frequently. You mentioned the over-reliance on dating apps for men.
Sure.
And you also talked about social media and how powerful it could be. Can you go into that?
I talk about how there's 4 ways to meet women in today's day and age.
Yeah.
There's dating apps, there's cold approach, there's social circle, and social media. And I list them in that order because they go from the easiest, least expensive, but lowest success solution to the hardest, most expensive, highest success solution. So dating apps they revolutionized how people get together.
Yeah.
You can make a profile in 10 minutes. It costs you nothing, and you can be swiping on singles in your area. So it would be weird if it were cheap, convenient, and successful. I mean, that would like having a crystal ball to predict the stock market.
And if you're good looking enough, that's how it works.
Yeah, and I
men.
do say that if you're a man and you're below a certain level of just pure physical attractiveness, it's probably not going to work out for you.
Correct.
But even if you are a more attractive man, you do need to tend towards massive action to see good results in a dating app.
And you're most likely, while the women may be attractive that you swipe right with, they're most likely going to be sex workers or have a mental disorder or have multiple kids.
I suppose it's possible.
23% of men report getting scammed off a dating app. 69% of men, I read in one report that they've been friend zoned. Been put in. They go on a date with a girl, and the girl puts them in a friend zone.
Well, that sounds just like, what were the statistics before dating apps?
That's
a lot of women
I know,
get
but
friend
just
zoned
imagine
anyway.
paying a premium for a dating app and then to get friend zoned. So I'm not anti dating apps. I just think they're massively inefficient, unless you're in the top 4.5% of men who get.
I wouldn't say you have to be in the top 4. That's a very small margin. I think you have to be in the top, let's say, quarter. And you can potentially stylize your profile in a certain way. I mean, most men are wallpaper.
Yeah.
You kind of want to be a slightly exaggerated version of yourself and to lean into some kind of trope, potentially.
Sure.
To be more attractive to fewer women is your goal on a dating app.
Yes.
And to, of course, to take massive action. You have to swipe hundreds and hundreds of times.
So now, because there's 9 men for every 1 woman on Tinder, Tinder has trying to get women to come back to the
Tinder's
platform.
dead, man.
Yeah.
Tinder's dead.
In order to get people to come back to the platform, they've put in a new height filter. I believe it started this week, so women can filter out for certain heights. 5'9", I believe, is the average in the United States. And that is 17% of women said that they'd be interested in a man who was 5'9", even though that's the average. And then 17% of the U.S. population is 6 feet tall. 6'3", I believe, is 1%. And then it was just like the number of women who wanted men who were 6'3". It was just like they were taking massive swaths of men and like making it even worse for the guys at the bottom.
Yeah.
In the dating apps.
I talk about that in a couple of pages of the book, in the sense that the economics and the psychological experience of dating apps tend to draw men and women in different directions, which is that, what's my perspective as a man? I'm sitting alone in my house. I don't have any intrasexual competition as far as I can tell. I don't see the other men on the apps.
Yes.
I'm just me and this infinite parade of women. So from my perspective, I'm the only employer in town, as it were, and there's millions of applicants.
Yes.
So just like in globalism, there's always somebody out there who will do the same job for cheaper.
Yeah.
And so that tends to drive down the negotiated price for the sexual transaction, which is where you get the phenomenon of fuckboys, which is basically like, let's cut to the chase. Give me exactly what I want. Maybe I'll take you on a date if you're lucky. But like, I know that there's some woman out there who will give me what I want. And that guy is right.
Yeah.
By the same token, the woman has the same experience mirrored. I'm the only woman. I'm the only vendor in town, so I can dictate my price. Got to be 6'3", got to have abs, got to be very attractive, or else, I mean, what are you going to do? I'm the only rodeo in town.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not true, but that's the psychological experience of dating apps.
Yeah. Have you heard the concept in dating, the familiar versus unfamiliar environment?
No.
Okay, so the unfamiliar environment is dating apps or cold approach. So, because funny, you mentioned dating apps, cold approach, social media, and social circle. The unfamiliar environment, in the unfamiliar environment, the more attractive man does better.
Sure.
He crushes in the unfamiliar environment. It's an incredible, you should look this up. I would love for you to do a reaction on this. Lucy Hill does a survey in 2015. She surveys 176 heterosexual couples. She asked them, when did they meet? And then when did you guys start dating? And then how long have you been dating? And then they look at the time period, the delta between those two numbers, and they say, this is how long you guys were friends. In some cases, they were friends. Some cases, maybe they were both seeing some other person, but they were in each other's orbit. Then they actually ask a third question, were you guys friends? And then they look at correlations. Then they look at all 167 couples, and they have these, I don't know if they were college students or whoever, and they rated them from +3 to -3 on physical attractiveness. And then they looked at the correlation of physical attractiveness in relation to how long they'd known each other before they started dating. If they had just met and they started dating within the first month, the correlation was like 0.72. It was a high correlation of physical attractiveness, meaning if you wanted to date the 10 when you first met her, the best way to do that was to be a 10, right? As they got to 4 or 5 months, the correlation got down into, I want to say 20 or 30%, 0.3 or 0.2. When they got to 9 months, the correlation was 0. Meaning the guy who was a 5 who wanted to date the 10, if he put her in his social circle for 9 months and maybe friend zoned her, then that's when you would see that happen.
No shit.
Yes, it's incredible. Look it up. Lucy Hill 2015 study where she goes over this. And so what you said before, familiar versus unfamiliar environment, the greatest way to take them from the unfamiliar environment, which is cold approach or dating apps, to the familiar environment is what the other two things you said, which is social media that you use to build a social circle. And so I was wondering if you could talk about the other end of this, which is the power of social media in comparison to what you said, the over-reliance on dating apps. And you also talked about men being able to garner a lot of attention, being an attraction trigger for women.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, I think. One little asterisk with respect to what you just described.
Yeah.
I doubt that it would have worked if these not that attractive guys, after, introduced a woman to the social circle and he was like the low guy on the totem pole.
Sure.
Right? So the way I talk about social circle is it generally only works if you are one of the top dogs, which you can create. Like you can be a contextual alpha. You either go into an organization, you climb the ranks, or you build an organization up around yourself. That takes more work, but you can ensure that you're going to be the linchpin around which everything spins.
Yeah.
And that's going to give you a sense of status and importance that you might not be able to find anywhere else. So make it, right?
Yeah.
Why is social media so important? Well, that's where the most beautiful women are. That's one thing. The 9s and 10s aren't on dating apps. They might not be hanging out at the dive bar that you go to. They might not be on your softball team, right? So where are the most beautiful women? Unless you want to go to the nightclubs, and then you have to deal with those sorts of issues as well. They're on social media. And there's no way in a million years that you can DM a baddie with 1 million followers and get a response unless you have 1 million followers or something like that. So it's amazing that women don't make use of social media more than they do for dating purposes. Like you literally have access to royalty, movie stars, athletes. People actually read their DMs.
And they'll respond, yeah.
There's no gatekeeping. Usually you have to go through their agents and their bodyguards and their secretaries. It's like you have direct access to almost every powerful, attractive man on the planet. And all you have to do is be like, hi. And you won't even shoot your shot. You know what I'm saying? So that makes me feel not a lot of sympathy for women when they tell me that it's difficult finding a man that they want and are attracted to. But they're there. Yeah. And you can now have direct access to almost every other person on the planet. So to create a situation, especially on Instagram, I think Instagram is the best one to do that right now. I think there are 2 ways to do that. One is you get the social cred, which is you build up hundreds of thousands of followers. Obviously, that's going to take time. It's going to be difficult to do. But the key there for guys is their content doesn't even have to cater to women. Like if you have 100,000 men who are all following you and saying, dude, you're the fucking bomb, man, you're the best. I can't believe, like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like that validation from 100,000 men is going to make you a top tier man, even if it's about like car engines, even if it's about gardening tools, like it doesn't matter. Like that's the great thing about the algorithms, actually. So there's a lot of things to complain about, but you can find a niche and there's people out there who are very into that thing that you are very into, and you could potentially be an alpha in that context, right? Or you can potentially use Instagram, and that's not an either or, but as kind of like a dating pamphlet.
Sure.
And I know guys who have thrown $10,000, $20,000 at this problem and hired some professional photographers and some marketers. And it's like, this is a 10-page glossy brochure on the Michael experience. Yeah. And we're going to get you from different angles, exploring different facets of your life. And it's like, this is what you get if you sign up to be Michael's girlfriend.
Yeah.
And the idea here is I could see myself as a woman in that picture next to that man.
And that, right there at the Valley of Fire or in front of the Burj Khalifa or whatever. Yes, correct. It's exactly right.
So it's traveling, but there's also you doing business and a bunch of guys looking at you respectfully. It could be the shirtless pic because you just got back from the gym and you're feeling the pump. So it's lots of different facets and saying like, this is who I am. Do you want to join me?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I say is that men tend to want the Barbie doll and women want all the shit that Ken doll comes with.
Yeah.
So if you can kind of paint that this is what the Michael doll comes with, you're going to be much more successful if you DM, even if you have 10 followers or your profile is private.
Yeah, you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of followers if you have an interesting profile. So like what you just discussed, you know, we haven't even had a discussion about this. That is like maybe 15% of my program is we go over meticulously the type of photos. So lifestyle photos, that's us in front of the Grand Canyon or some, you know, playing poker in Vegas or doing something cool, right? Getting out of an awesome car or being out on a boat with a bunch of friends. Then there's candid photos, which is photos of you doing things, but it's offset. So you're not looking directly at the camera. Sure. So often for me, one of my candids is I'm interviewing a girl and it's a shot off to the side and I'll post a candid photo or a photo of someone else taking a picture of us or us just in a candid moment where everyone looks cool. And then the third type is pre-selection. And photo could be all three of these things. A pre-selection or women want what other women want. It's a photo where women, not in a lascivious way, look like they approve and condone of you being there and are happy that you're there. And I make a very big caveat on this. The women's hips need to be turned in towards you and you are not touching them. They are touching you. I'm very big on this. I don't touch the girls touch me in the photos. And it seems to make a massive difference. And obviously, yes, you saw the Keanu Reeves. He won't touch girls. He has all these pictures where his hands are like off the girl like this to show, hover, to show he's not doing it. I started doing that actually. And doing that, those three types of photos along with a great offer. So the other thing that I said is like, you know, Orion, I don't know if you've ever been to a Maxim party, but if you knew a pretty girl and want to get her on the guest list, I can get her on the guest list for any Maxim party in the whole world, right? It's really easy. All the Babes in Toyland parties, all the teatro parties, anything with Miami Swim Week, Las Vegas Swim Week, Los Angeles Swim Week. It's really easy if you know beautiful women to contact one promoter and be like, dude, I know you don't know me, but I'd like to put this girl on the guest list for the party. They will all say yes, and the girl gives you credit. And you talking about the baddie with 1 million followers, you have, let's say you have 1,000 followers, she has 1 million followers, and you say, hey, would you like to walk the red carpet for the Maxim party? All of a sudden it's like, yes, who are you? Follow. It's the most maddening thing. It's very similar to the parallel lives thing. It's very similar. So you not having hundreds of thousands of followers, but a very curated IG along with incredible offers, it's unbelievable how many women you can meet doing that. And then what have you created when you all meet together in real life? A social circle. This is how you've created a social circle. So like I'm hosting a costume competition at Marquee on June 22nd. I'm inviting like 4,000 girls to this. I have a VA who's gonna do all the invites for me from my account. When we show up there, all my guy friends, they've got a comp table. They're gonna be judges in the costume competition, right? I have a bunch of guys who are like huge lawyers, celebrities, social media influencers. So now look what I've done. I've created where I have 50 beautiful women showing up to be in the costume competition, and all my guy friends have come and they're being the judge, and I'm being paid for this. That is a social circle. And now what happens is, whereas Chad Thundercock beats me in an unfamiliar environment, now I'm in a familiar environment where I have the microphone and I'm doing all these things.
Certainly.
It's amazing. You can do the same thing by having people come back to your place for Taco Tuesday, trying tequila and playing Monopoly. It's the same. You can still be the leader of your social circle, which is like what you said before. This is one of the reasons why required reading for my clients is when you talked about this concept here, was the idea of using social media and a social circle and how that is how you would get 9s and 10s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're probably not going to get them just walking around. You're not going to find them on the dating apps.
There's a new article I read. 5 nightclubs every week are closing down in London because women aren't going out.
No kidding.
Yeah. My friends who do nightlife in LA, they say it's dead. It's just completely gone. Like nightlife in LA is just because the girls are all, you know, making content on.
Sure, it makes sense to me. One of the things I argue in the book is that if people can get the same things cheaper, easier, and more safely, they will choose to do so.
Of course.
So there is an inherent risk for a woman to go out to the clubs. You know, you hear about SA and you hear about roofies and you don't know who you're dealing with. So if I can get access to those men without having to wear 4-inch heels and exposing myself to risk, why wouldn't I take that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems rational to me.
Exactly right. Exactly right. one of the biggest things of confusion, I believe it was you who said this, was the concept of a woman. So I've said this before, a woman cannot determine her own sexual market value. It is the value of the highest status man she can get to commit.
Yeah.
And a man does not determine his sexual market value. It is the most attractive women who are willing to have sex with him.
Yeah.
And that defines their sexual market value. And what happens here is because men can derive their sexual market value from who wants to have sex with them, women may confuse the same idea for themselves.
Sure.
And then women confuse sex for commitment.
Yep.
And that's when she has sex with Drake and thinks that she can date, you know, the corporate attorney and doesn't understand why neither wants to commit.
Or could even marry Drake.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be the case either.
Correct.
So just like we were talking about earlier, there's plenty of mistresses who are hoping that their men are going to leave their wives, and
Yes.
they will never, ever in a million years do so.
Yeah.
Because what men look for, and what people look for in a short-term sexual relationship tends to differ from what they're looking for a long-term committed partnership. With men, it seems to differ even more than with women, because with an even casual sexual relationship, from a woman's perspective, there's always the risk of pregnancy.
Sure.
And the dependence and the vulnerability and the economics that come with that experience. And so I think there's a greater overlap between the types of men that women choose even for one-night stands and the types of men that women would commit to long-term. But men are a little bit more separated from those realities, and so there's a huge difference. There's huge differences between the women that men will go home with at the end of the night and the women that they'll introduce to their friends, and the women they'll introduce to their parents, and the women that they will actually stand in front of an altar and God himself and say, this is the one for me. And because women don't have that experience, we can think of it as a failure in perspective taking between the genders.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also data on this, the beer goggle studies. They basically, as they get closer and closer to 2 a.m., the standards by which men will choose women start to decrease. So when
Which might actually be rational.
Yes.
You know, it's like the baked goods go on sale when we're getting near closing time, as it were.
Yeah, it was when women were like stepping outside their relationship to cheat, they wanted men who were actually taller and better looking, who made even more money. They actually wanted to cheat up often. When men were cheating, it was Dr. Buss who said it was embarrassingly low standards. Like, men did not care at all about a woman's intelligence. For a partner, he cared about her intelligence.
Yeah.
For a liaison, the standards were incredibly low. So it goes to what you said before.
And also, to close the loop on what we were talking about earlier with respect to jealousy, I think it also comes from Buss, where he examined the role of jealousy in the wake of infidelity in gay and lesbian relationships.
Yes.
And they were differentially mediated due to different variables.
Yeah.
In the gay relationships, men experienced far more jealousy if the third party made more money than they did.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the lesbians experienced more jealousy if the third party was more physically attractive or younger than they were.
Oh, wow.
So these aren't necessarily heteronormative norms.
So what you're saying is the idea that these things are exactly heteronormative. Men are men or women are women. There's another part Dr. Buss talks about, the same study. When gay men cheated, the other gay men said, did you fuck him? When women cheated, the lesbian women say, do you love her? So it was like, these were ubiquitous. It wasn't that they were gay or straight or lesbian. It was that they were men and women, and their interests were based on them being men or women, not gay or straight.
Yeah, I think one of Buss's conclusions is basically that, according to all the research that he's done, the main difference between gay men and straight men is just where they want to put it, basically. It's like straight men want to have just as much sex as gay men do.
This is a really, really funny point. It was Gatzat. He writes a book about this, and he talks about the concept of pornography and strip clubs was only based on male patriarchy. And then he's like, then why do gay men consume massive amounts of pornography and go to strip clubs as well? Is that also because of patriarchy? It was such a great response to that whole idea. No, it's not because of that. Because when you look at, and the other thing is male selectivity. When you look at, they do you see the survey about the men in the Castro with like 200 sexual partners in a year?
I've heard it over 500 when they did the bathhouse studies. Yeah.
So that means with no female selectivity involved whatsoever, this is what the male libido will do.
Men are the gas and women are the brakes.
Yeah.
And when you look at the differences between average number of sexual partners in gay men and straight men,
it's outrageous.
It is. It's like they're functionally equivalent to the number of partners of straight women. So women are basically calling the shots with respect to when do straight men get to have sex.
Yes.
Which is why we say that they're the gatekeepers of sex, right?
Yeah. There's some interesting studies you should look on men who take anabolic steroids, how many more sexual partners they have. It's crazy.
How many more sexual
It's
partners
like,
do they
it's
have?
like 4 or 5 times as many. I was like, this is wild. Like you look at this, and then the other one is serum testosterone. Men with higher testosterone levels are more likely to cheat, which seems to make sense. And
Sure.
and then there's also
Does cheating raise testosterone? Has that study been done?
that's an interesting one. I haven't thought about
I
that.
bet it's reciprocal.
One I would love for people to do is, do women who have borderline personality disorder have higher testosterone levels? When you think about the impulse, the lack of impulse control, the promiscuous behavior, those could be signs of higher testosterone. Like I'm curious if somebody's ever looked at a correlation between those two things.
I don't know. My favorite, personally, theory about borderline is that it's actually the same underlying dynamic as narcissistic personality
Yes,
disorder.
yes.
That's just expressed differentially in the genders.
Interesting. 40% of people who have BPD are narcissists.
Yeah, there's a lot of comorbidity
Yeah.
among cluster B personality disorders.
Yeah.
Yes, but we do know that in pure BPD and NPD, there are very strong gender skews.
Yeah, yeah. This is the last one I want to ask you about. Because you talk about advice for women and the concept of women need to hunt. And the women ask me for advice sometimes, and I say, the most important thing is I think you need to pay attention to what he does and not how you feel about it. And you're going to find out whether or not a man is more faithful or not more faithful. Because it's the guy who says, I'm going to leave my wife for you. Those are words. Does he actually leave his wife? Those are actions.
Sure.
And I tell women all this all the time. If you pay more attention to what a man does and not how you feel about it, that's the best advice I've given to women. You have the advice of women like investigating and hunting for the man they want.
Yeah.
Can you go into that?
Well, I talked that there are 2 broad ways of dating. There's hunting and fishing. Hunting is where you target one particular prey for your quarry. Fishing in the sense of like casting a wide net and bringing a whole bunch onto the boat and then choosing the tastiest morsels, as it were.
Yeah.
Everything else gets thrown back. And I think in general, most men are better suited for fishing and most women are better suited for hunting. For the pure fact that most women will not have sex with most men,
Yes.
but most men will have sex with most women. Okay? So all things being equal, if a woman targets a man for a sexual relationship, he's probably going to say yes. Even if he's married, he's probably going to say yes.
Correct.
Even if it's not going to lead to a more committed relationship, he's probably going to say yes. But that is potentially the foot in the door for a woman. So we are in a society in which, for better or for worse, sex precedes commitment, and that's not going to change. And so one thing I argue is that the offer of a compelling, attractive, no strings attached sexual opportunity is like the Trojan horse that a woman can offer even a highly successful, committed man to open the doors of the city and let her in, because it looks like a great thing that he's just fallen into when it's really a trap, right? But that's how you get the man who might be committed and successful and have the pick of any woman that he wants to focus on you.
You said it often starts as a casual relationship.
Everything starts as a casual relationship, unless you're Mormon or something. Like everything starts as a casual relationship. And the way to get a committed relationship is the same pathway as how to get a casual relationship.
That's great, yeah.
It's not like the ones that you marry, you go out on walks in the park and you hold hands and drink tea. No, it's the same pathway. It's just that we continue to go past the casual part. But you can't skip the casual part in 2025, for better or for worse. So the way to get a committed relationship is through a casual relationship. So there are now stages. You have to master the attractive stage, which is what dominates the casual relationship. But if you don't have anything else to offer besides just the sexual opportunity, you're not going to progress past that point. So it's like, that's how women get thrown out in the morning, both literally and figuratively, right? Is they offered the sexual opportunity, but there wasn't a more compelling reason to keep her around after she was useful, let's say, right? And so I argue that the way to stay in the city is to assimilate herself into the economy, is like make herself useful and indispensable. Because the idea here, this is also a trap. The men might think like, she did my laundry or she cooked dinner for me tonight. I'm such a man. That's a trap. Because the more that man becomes dependent on that woman's support and behavior, the more painful or inconvenient it will become to extract her from his life. And at some point, he's going to be like, well, shit, she's around her all the time and she's doing all this stuff for me. I guess she's my girlfriend. I guess she's my wife now. And that's how you stay with the man. But if you say, well, I don't want to do the sex part, I just want to go straight to being, a little wifey. It's like, good luck getting the attractive men who have their pick of the litter. You have to do both.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah, you mentioned also women punish the men they like the most. So they'll have sex with a random bartender, but make the guy they really like wait.
There's part of it. I was inspired to do that one because of Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Because I was like, man, Tom Brady, so handsome, so talented, so successful, a real man's man, and he couldn't even keep his wife, right? And what was at least the public story about that? As far as I can tell, she didn't want him to go back for another season in football. She wanted him to spend more time around the house. Well, if he was a no good, deadbeat person, would she really want him to be staying at home with her and the kids? He was punished because she wanted more of him.
Yeah.
And she wanted more of him because she was attracted to him, because he was a good, attractive man.
Yeah.
That's the reward that you get as being a good, attractive man, is that women want more and more of you.
What might be the case also is that the lessons that you and I have learned about intersexual dynamics, Tom Brady was so good looking and so successful, he never had to learn them.
It's possible, but I think he did the right thing. He certainly didn't say, well, I wanted to go for another ring, but, my one and only
he
is
came back and then won a Super Bowl. And then he said he was going to retire and then came back again.
Yep.
And at 44 years old, led the league in passing yards.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I think
shout out to HGH, by the way. Shout out.
I wasn't a part of that relationship. I've never met Mr. Brady, but it's like, it seemed like he just said, okay, if that's what you want, sign the papers, and he went back to practice, which is pretty much
he was still broken up about it.
Oh,
but
he was, okay.
Yeah, he was pretty broken up. And then also it turns out she was also at the same time seeing a jiu-jitsu instructor, which goes into a whole nother thing. He was there when she wasn't.
She also has a higher net worth than him, which is something that people don't often talk about, which can go into some of the statistics that we were talking about before, is that even though this guy is pretty much...
He's royalty.
The man that... One of the men that most men would want to be that's alive on this planet...
It's Tom Brady.
When the woman has a higher net worth, maybe there's more demands for having the structure of the relationship go her way.
Yeah.
And there's less room for him to even be a top successful man.
There's also an argument that maybe just the people in her ear are just giving bad advice. You can do better.
Possible.
Why isn't he here?
Well, no, she can't do better. The question is whether she needs a man at all at that point.
Correct. Yeah. She's worth all like $1 billion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly right,
she's going to be always Tom Brady's ex.
Yeah.
And so she'll be able to have his name and reputation around her for the rest of her life without even having to talk to the man again.
Yeah.
So it's not that she could do better. There's no one better than Tom.
Tom Brady could run for president and would probably win.
Vote for Mr. Brady.
Yeah.
2028.
Yeah, I could see that.
But it's do I need a man at all?
Yeah.
And that could be a rational conclusion that, you know what, I don't.
They could both be right. She could actually not need, she has $1 billion. She could say approximately, I don't need a man. And then at the same time, Tom Brady could be like, this is bad and I don't want to break up my family so I can spend time with my kids. Both things can be right.
Of course.
Yeah.
Someone doesn't have to be wrong.
Yeah. Beautiful. What do you have coming up in the future?
Well, I'm just sort of grinding away. I went back to 2 episodes a week, so I'm putting out more content than before.
Yeah.
I'm working on a book. I'm about halfway through it right now. It's a very different book from this. It's actually a book of historical fiction based on the last days of Vincent van Gogh.
Oh, nice.
That touches on a lot of things about sanity and art and truth. And
have you read Ken Follett?
that name sounds familiar.
He's my favorite, probably my favorite American writer next to George R. R. Martin. And all he does is write books about the Middle Ages. He has this one called the Century Trilogy, and it's all historical fiction. So it was probably the most education I've gotten about World War I, World War II, Vietnam, et cetera, and the Cold War, but it was all fiction. But it's so interesting. Sure. So it's interesting you say that, yeah.
This is something that I actually wrote a one-act play about when I was an undergraduate at NYU a long time ago. So this story has been kicking around in my imagination for about 2 decades. Vincent van Gogh shot himself. A lot of people know that. But it took him 2 days to die. And so the book is kind of about what happens during those last 2 days.
That's amazing.
As it were.
Someone should do the same thing for Alexander Hamilton. He gets shot. You remember?
Well, someone kind of did.
Aaron Burr, he either called him a homosexual or called him the N-word. I can't remember which it was. And it was because there was always speculation that because he was born in Jamaica, that one of his grandparents was.
He was born in the
Black.
Caribbean. I don't think it was Jamaica, but
Where was it?
it was in the Caribbean, but I'm not sure it was Jamaica.
Okay, I thought it was Jamaica. And then Aaron Burr insulted him. They go to the island. Aaron Burr does not intend to shoot him. He ends up he's shooting him in the hip, and he ends up dying like 2 days later.
Well, someone made a musical about that.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty.
I didn't know that. I haven't seen the musical. I didn't know it was like 2 days of what he was going through. But that is going to be really interesting. 2 days for him to die, and then what he goes through internally.
Yeah, and apparently he was lucid, and he could talk for a lot of it, and his brother was there. And so I'm having a lot of fun writing it. Like I said, it's about halfway through. Very different book, but I'm working on that. Other than that, I'm just, seeing my clients, going to the gym, writing, traveling.
One of the things I do recommend for those of you who want to start a podcast or a channel, look at the way you make content easily at your own home. Well,
Sure.
it's not a huge setup.
Nope.
I watch you on Chris Williamson the other day. You weren't like getting all dressed up for every episode. It's just.
I didn't. Well, one thing that I would do differently if I were to start over again is I would have invested in a better microphone earlier on. People will forgive poor video on YouTube sooner than they'll forgive poor audio. But I wanted to be like pure old school capitalist. I am going to only invest in this hobby when it starts to generate income, and then I will invest it back in. Probably I should have put down a few $100 to get a better microphone earlier. But you don't have to lay down thousands of dollars. You don't have to get a professional studio. You can start right where you're at because it's going to suck anyway.
Yeah.
Even if your audio and visual is good, but your content still isn't up to par, it takes a while to find your voice.
Yeah.
You just have to get started, and it takes about 100 episodes to get the suck off.
And the idea, you did the thing that was the easiest, which was to do it from home. That's the same thing. I built a studio in my home.
It's also during COVID. I mean, there was nowhere else to go.
But the point is, it's when you have to drive 35 minutes to the studio and then spend 30 minutes setting up the audio and then all that kind of stuff that makes it harder. I recommend people use Riverside or Zoom to get guests that can't come to your studio and do it from home, maybe after the gym. Because the more repeatable you make it, the more likely you're going to stick with it.
I did have to kind of create a system around that.
Yeah.
I like to do deep batched work.
Yeah.
So I would work on scripts whenever I can, but I would set up my recording thing and bang out 5 or 6 episodes at once and then do all the editing in one.
Are you reading notes off the screen while you're talking?
Yeah. That's.
What are you using, Loom? What are you using for that?
Maybe I should. So what my process is typically most of my ideas come from conversations, maybe with folks like you, or more commonly, the folks I'm doing consultations with. That's how I know that these are real problems that people are experiencing.
Yeah.
And I have an idea, and so I open up a recording app, and I just do a monologue. I riff on my own for about 10 minutes. Then I use a speech-to-text translator to turn it into a document, and then I kind of clean it up. It takes about an hour to transform an idea into a finished script, as it were. And so when I'm recording, it's just Word. I'm just reading a Word document.
So Smart Prompt has this thing where it'll actually listen to your voice and it'll move up as you talk. Yeah,
that could help.
Yeah,
that could help. I mean, people have complained about me not making unbroken contact with the lens of the camera.
Yeah,
that's very hard to do. The lens sucks energy.
It does. Yeah,
it's very difficult to remain vibrant and energized when you're not getting any kind of feedback whatsoever from the camera.
Yeah.
But teleprompters have created another host of new problems for me. So this is the best solution that I've developed for my needs right now.
To study for my podcast, like I said, I watched 4 of your episodes. I've already read your book, took notes, and then I took transcripts from like another 5 episodes that you had, and then I put them into one big document, and then I had ChatGPT go through and then take all the questions and all the things, put it into the same bullet point format. And the document I'm going to send it to you, came out, was so incredibly useful. Awesome. It was terrific. And because I usually do about 10 hours of study. It was a really funny thing because you did that Soft White Underbelly with Sadia Khan. So I made a video about Sadia. I love Sadia's work.
Have you met Sadia?
I've never met her before. And I made one where I was criticizing her because I disagree with her on one thing. She thinks that any woman who would let her man sleep with another woman is also cheating. And I said, well, that discounts all of Islam. And I just made a point. I was like, I understand why she's saying it. And it also is very important to a female narrative to believe that, because what if some other woman would let you do that? She might be the better offer. And she took it personal and wrote a kind of a mean comment to me on my thing. And I wrote her back. I was like, hey, I didn't want to make this anything personal. Your stuff about men and women being friends, I totally agree with. And I did a bunch of stuff. And then she goes, something to the effect. And I said, I'd love for you to come on the show and have a conversation. And her response is, yeah, I don't think it'd be constructive. She thinks that I'm a red pill troglodyte, knuckle dragging, woman hating, whatever. And I just remember thinking to myself, I was like, I just did 15 hours of study for Orion Taraban. Like, she has no idea. And it's one of the funniest things because I still have to do this over and over again. I remember hearing this from Dr. Bussey. He was like, that's probably the most research anybody's ever done interviewing me. Ty Lopez, it was the same thing. The first time I met Rollo, it was 4 hours that I did the interview. And it's just one of these things where it's like, especially with the AI models, you can do so much work now in researching again, this is for anybody who wants to start a podcast. There's so much that you can use with these AI models to really help you with your questions and like format an idea for how to research somebody. Because I think that's one of the biggest compliments for me is when I go on someone else's podcast and they've actually, done some research.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it seems like you've done that.
Yeah, I remember the first time you came on, I was like, I want to do more research than anybody's ever done on Orion when he comes on my show. Yeah.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah, awesome.
Well, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, dude, it's been really great. Guys, I want you to check out his book. This is The Value of Others. This is my signed copy, and also the audio version. You read the audio version, which is terrific.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, that one's great. I'm really big, guys, on audio books. They're really terrific. So I would definitely check that out. And you'll notice like the ideas that he gets to, he is taking, this is probably the most concise explanation of the intersexual dynamic marketplace I've ever seen. I highly recommend you guys read this book and check it out. And I will see all of you guys next week.